Chapter 799. The Honorable Marshall Continent's intelligence system tried to obtain the Ocean Guardian Stronghold's defense map, but to no avail, and only knew that it had been redesigned. That star treasures. All of the generals stopped their discussions. Their attention was attracted to the battlefield. One after another, the towering colossal figures slowly lit up with light auras, as though they were ancient beasts that were slowly awakening from their slumber. Bang! He knew that the higher-ups were more interested in Heaven's Road than the Sacred Saint Galaxy. But Go Chung Wendao was the complete opposite. Instead of betting on the uncertain and unknown Heaven's Road, why not focus on the Sacred Saint Galaxy? The large-scale siege boats' attacks were extremely slow. Every attack that struck the defensive barrier would produce an extremely low explosive sound. It was like an ancient giant brandishing a heavy hammer. Every attack would strike deep into the hearts of people, causing them to feel a slight numbness, causing them to be filled with reverence. Go Chung Wendao's attention had already turned to the layout of the entire southern region. Too terrifying. The large-scale siege boats were completing their preparations to attack the stronghold. The preparations of the large-scale siege boats were extremely complicated. The energy that they spewed out was extremely astonishing, and almost no materials could withstand it. Thus, they needed to use complicated structures to share the pressure. The defensive barrier is broken. Unparalleled merit. That should be referring to unifying the Sacred Saint Galaxy. Thinking about the Ocean Guardian Stronghold wailing under the dazzling light aura, and the entire southern region trembling in front of him, an indescribable joy surged from his heart. The surroundings of the Ocean Guardian Stronghold was a true death zone. The surging energy was extremely fatal. The aftermath of the explosion was enough to shatter warships. They were large-scale siege boats, the top beasts of the food chain. Upon launching an attack, they would not be able to move, and just like how they required a long time to prepare, their cool-down time was equally long. The star treasures frantically absorbed the incoming energy, as though they had been starving for 10,000 years. Oh my God! Inside the Ocean Guardian Stronghold, it was extremely calm. From the initial panic, the swift army soldiers quickly adapted. The stronghold beneath their feet was still trembling, but there was no more panic on their faces. In a moment, the Ocean Guardian Stronghold's defensive barrier regained its brightness. It was too intense. Every star treasure blossomed with a faint light aura. Xie Yuan's gaze never left the large-scale siege boats, and when he saw the light auras of the large-scale siege boats becoming brighter, he took a deep breath. Open all the gates. The Ocean Guardian Stronghold's defensive barrier was broken. The second large siege ship opened fire. The third large siege ship opened fire. But the Honorable Marshall Continent's generals did not care. In front of the 22 sieging boats, any stronghold was like a crispy biscuit. Target number 15, prepare to attack. We have been waiting impatiently. The other side must have been suffering for a long time. In the face of absolute power, what's the use of being a famous general? Inside the Ocean Guardian Stronghold, it was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop, and everyone held their breaths. To any general, unifying the sacred region was more tempting than conquering an unknown world. Exclamations and praises sounded out. Many of the Honorable Marshall Continent's generals revealed fanaticism on their faces. Their hearts were trembling and cheering. All of them were filled with pride. How powerful! That is the Honorable Marshall Continent, our Honorable Marshall Continent. Once they finished their preparations, Xie Yuan would have no chance at all. His subordinate's report interrupted his thoughts. He looked up and saw that Xie Yuan had not attacked yet. He shook his head. Xie Yuan was good at defense, but he lacked courage. Although it was a trap ahead, but it was the only chance. No matter how slim the hope was, to not fight for it and just wait for death, such an action was something that Go Chung Wendao, who viewed offense as his life, could not accept. But thinking about it, all the generals that were good at defense had the same character. Now, on Go Chung Wendao's flagship, gasps and exclamations sounded out. Even the generals of the Honorable Marshall Continent had rarely seen the might of a large-scale sieging boat. But the atmosphere was still extremely tense. everyone's mental state was extremely tense. Hurried commands rang out amidst the whistling explosions that filled the sky. Gocheng Wendao was shocked. Since you're determined to be a turtle, then I will shatter your turtle shell. An extremely bright and thick light pillar instantly pierced through the entire battlefield and smashed onto the defensive barrier of the Ocean Guardian stronghold. In the shadows of the Ocean Guardian stronghold, one after another sluice gates were opened, and the chaotic energy in the sea of energy surged in. Behind every sluice gate was a silver star treasure. The entire battlefield was enveloped by the dazzling white-silver light and the low and powerful explosions. The bombardment lasted for an entire hour, which was even louder than the previous explosions, causing everyone's mental state to be roused. The indestructible Ocean Guardian stronghold was like a small wooden house in the middle of a storm, on the verge of collapse. At that time, the Ocean Guardian stronghold was already perfect in his heart, but he still managed to obtain a few star treasures from Master Bing. It was because of his perfectionist mentality. Even without the star treasures, he did not think that anyone would be able to take down the Ocean Guardian stronghold. The entire Ocean Guardian stronghold was trembling intensely, to the point that they could not even stand properly. Everyone grabbed onto anything that could be stabilized, their minds in a daze. Who knew that they would actually be put to use? Sluice gate number 2, open. A light flashed past Xie Yuan's eyes. He did not know if he could achieve the title of third best defender under the heavens. But in terms of defense, he had absolute confidence. This pride was hidden deep in his heart, and no one knew about it. Just like how no one knew that the Ocean Guardian stronghold that he had painstakingly constructed was his own masterpiece. Master, the preparations are complete. That's right, I was still thinking if I could witness the glory of the third best defender under the heavens, but I no longer have the chance. If I am not wrong, it should be 38M. The urgent order was quickly passed down, causing the atmosphere to become extremely tense. The protective barrier is not even at 10%. This truly makes one feel despair. Gocheng Wendao had specially laid out the trap, and his direct subordinated army was rubbing their palms. If Xie Yuan were to give up on the stronghold and fight with them, Gocheng Wendao would be equally happy. The star treasures are fully charged. No one could stop them. The large-scale siege boats were powerful, but at the same time, they were weak as they did not have any defensive capabilities. The complicated structure meant that they were easily destroyed. As expected of the top-grade siege boats, the light pillar that attacked just now was at least 20 m in diameter. Xie Yuan's only chance was to take advantage of the time when the war beasts were preparing to launch a sneak attack and destroy the large-scale siege boats. Xie Yuan did not use it right from the start. He was waiting for the large-scale siege boats to attack. He had never come into contact with large-scale siege boats before, but he understood the weaknesses of the war beasts. In terms of design, he had reached the pinnacle. Not only that, he had prepared a trump card that no one knew of. Conquering Heaven's Road might allow their path to unify the sacred Saint Galaxy to be smoother, but by the time Heaven's Road was conquered, he would no longer be young. The Shan continent would no longer be able to create any waves, and the entire situation of the southern region would be advantageous to the honorable Marshall continent. Gocheng Wendao listened to his subordinates' discussions. He lowered his head and drank his tea, and did not say anything to stop them. When he had first proposed a plan, he had met with intense opposition from many people, and, if not for his persistence, they would not even be able to achieve a quarter of the scale. The dazzling light aura enveloped the entire battlefield. The dazzling light aura caused people's eyes to feel pain. But even so, the honorable Marshall Continent's generals continued to widen their eyes. It was an extremely rare scene, and if they were to miss it, they would definitely regret it for the rest of their lives. In front of such a powerful force, who could stop them? No one understood the Ocean Guardian stronghold better than Xie Yuan. Every inch of space in the stronghold had been inspected by him, and every battle position was carefully selected by him. He had completely abandoned the previous defense arrangements and redesigned them. That's right, the strength of humans in front of these huge beasts is so insignificant. Let's attack. Xie Yuan's face immediately turned sinister. He roared with all his might. Attack! The star treasures are almost fully charged. His subordinate's tone carried a trace of nervousness, causing the atmosphere to become extremely tense. They marked the 22 large-scale siege boats with corresponding numbers and prepared for the upcoming battle. The southern region was theirs. The entire Sacred Saint Galaxy was theirs. Bang! The Southern Alliance was defeated, and they could use the pontoon bridge to quickly advance. With the Southern Alliance as the bridgehead, the difficulty of attacking the southern region would be greatly reduced. The 22 large-scale siege boats were all out of the Ocean Guardian Stronghold's warship weapons firing range, and the other party could only watch as their turtle shell was slowly being destroyed, unable to retaliate. The soldiers inside the stronghold were roused. They were not unfamiliar with the undulations that suddenly appeared. It was the undulations produced by the star treasures absorbing energy. But the intensity of the undulations far exceeded their imaginations. When he first saw the Sword Forest stronghold, he was attracted by the unique defense arrangement. He himself had profound attainments in defense arrangements, and in a short period of time, he understood the principles behind the Sword Forest stronghold. After that, being equipped the swift army with star treasures, and irresponsibly requested Xie Yuan to study the tactics. Xie Yuan had spent a great deal of effort, and his understanding of the star treasures had deepened. A complete Ocean Guardian stronghold held much more strategic value than a stronghold ruins. He only needed to arrange a small number of soldiers, and they would be able to hold the throat, which would be of great help to the entire southern region. The two officers in charge had flushed red faces and roared out at the same time. Truly pitiful. When the light aura dissipated, the Ocean Guardian stronghold appeared in their vision. The brightness of the defensive barrier had obviously dimmed by a large margin, causing another wave of exclamations. For a large-scale stronghold like the Ocean Guardian stronghold, its defensive barrier was definitely a sturdy turtle shell. Open Sluice Gate 1. But no one cared. It was just an attack from one large-scale siege boat. As long as a few more attacked at the same time, the Ocean Guardian stronghold's energy barrier would shatter. If there were no large-scale siege boats to shake the thick defensive barrier, who knew how many people would have to be sacrificed? Previously, they had probed and attacked, but were unable to do anything to the turtle shell. They watched the battlefield leisurely. Many of them even brewed tea and held onto the teacups, chatting in groups of 3 to 5, occasionally casting their gazes towards the battlefield. This is truly making us anxious. Such an unprecedented display of fireworks in the history of the Sacred Saint Galaxy has never appeared before. Chapter 800. Penniless. He was prepared to advise the master. The army was related to his and his family's future, and he could not let the master be so dispirited. He thought about it again. Maybe the master is just giving everyone a long-term goal. 100% is too much, but 50% is a possibility. Even if it is 50%, 100 lost surfaces resonating, that power is still extremely terrifying. Oh, refining spirit treasures. That thought flashed past his mind. Tang Tian's face fell. To a tyrant who had squandered money like dirt to buy armies and warships, and had always won by throwing money at his enemies, the feeling of being penniless was simply the worst. Without being able to borrow the power projected from the lost surfaces, his body and body were ordinary, and after hanging for an entire night, his expression became weary. If only Bing was here, it would be great, Tang Tian muttered in his mind. But he only muttered for a moment. Since no one can help me, I can only rely on myself. He racked his brains and tried his best to recall how Bing trained the army. Fu Zhengji, who thought that he understood, only realized how naive he was after the training. It was reasonable to say that their understanding of lost surfaces had already reached the peak, and their control over their power had reached a level where they could do as they wished, and they were able to handle the training. But no one expected for the master's request to be so high. To them, it was an impossible task. The 200 men were also at the perfection of their lost surfaces, but they were on a completely different level compared to the two of them. It was reasonable to say that Fu Zhengji and the rest were wealthy, but Tang Tian had never thought of using them. Tang Tian, who was born as a tyrant in Andrew Academy, had a simple thought: they're already following me. If I don't give them any benefits, I want to take away their wealth. Tang Tian, who thought that he had thought it through, was immediately overjoyed. This is easy to solve. Wait a minute. Tang Tian suddenly reacted. He was not in Ursa Major constellation, nor was he in the Sacred Saint Galaxy, but the Sin Domain, where he was penniless. Tang Tian did not start training as per usual, but scratched his chin. He was reflecting on himself. Towards the army, he had only started halfway, and was forced to do things beyond his capabilities. Bing had thought of torturing him to become a mechanical martial artist, but he did not want to torment him to become a military general. Even Bing, who had always cherished the glory of the Southern Cross, felt despair towards Tang Tian's path as a military general. Tang Tian had never thought that his talent in this aspect would be any better. When he found the master, he heard the master mumbling something in his sleep, but he did not understand a single word. The seemingly impossible goal left everyone dumbfounded. However, the Lord set an example and led everyone to train together. The adults in training were ruthless and did not care about feelings at all. If there was even the slightest mistake, they would have to start over, no matter how tired he was the day before. On the second day, Sir was unshakable, transforming into a machine that never knew fatigue. Over and over again, not only did the training not decrease, it increased instead. During the training process, the adult was like a devil. His emotions would not fluctuate in the slightest. There was no severe punishment or reprimand. His indifferent tone was always tirelessly correcting. His Excellency's understanding of the laws had reached such a terrifying level. Could it be that Master was actually the same as Du Ku, a domain martial artist? Tang Tian, who was about to go crazy, suddenly had a light in his eyes. That was a good idea. Furthermore, when he thought about how he would be facing a tyrant like Du Ku, a small amount of wealth would not be able to move him. To him, the Master's strength was without a doubt strong. The only person who could be compared to the Master was probably Sin Domain's #1 martial artist, Du Ku. As for whether the Master was stronger or Du Ku, that was not something he could judge. But no matter how strong the Master was, he was still too young and took things for granted. As expected, after the first day of training, the Master was so tired that he could not even move a finger. Thinking about that, Tang Tian did not have any reason to be angry. He felt that he had truly wronged everyone. If it was an ordinary matter, it was fine for everyone to listen to your orders, but if you wanted everyone to give their all, it would not be acceptable for them to be stingy. He was completely unable to see any flaws, and his demands were so strict that it caused people to be fearful. Furthermore, he was vicious and merciless, and if anyone were to provoke him, they would definitely die a horrible death. Although every single soldier was carefully selected by Fu Zhengji, but none of the martial artists that had joined had thought that the training would be so bitter. Now, upon hearing that word, he would subconsciously tremble. The army was quickly growing, and after a few days, it had become presentable. Although the Master was slightly strict, but thinking about the bright future, his heart could not help but become excited. Furthermore, it was 200 people. After ordering Fu Zhengji to release them, he continued to think of a way. Master is actually aiming for a 100% resonance, but the reality was right in front of him, and it was the best method he could think of. If the army was truly successful, the Sin Domain would naturally not be able to restrict him, and he would not even place Dooku in his eyes. At that time, who would dare to imprison the Null Division members? Wouldn't they just obediently send them to me? Empty promises? Although Tang Tian's skin was extremely thick, but he was still unable to do such a thing. He was an absolute perfectionist. If there was anything bad about it, it would be that the Master was too strict. Oftentimes, he felt that everyone had done well, but what awaited them would always be an emotionless again. The discipline was strict and fair. There were rewards and punishments. A penny was a pound. That logic was the same everywhere under the heavens. On the third day, after the Master finished training, he immediately fell asleep and did not even eat. Everyone felt that victory was in sight. The fourth day, the fifth day, the sixth day. Before he could say anything, the master saw him. His eyes lit up and said, "Your green sword. Let me take a look." This is the master's first reprimand, and I want to embarrass him. Isn't that courting death? Don't look at how he and Jize had completed the lost surface resonance, but what standard were the two of them at? Their control of the power projected from the lost surface was first-rate in the Sin domain. It did not seem difficult for the two of them to complete the resonance, but the level of technique required was not low. In their despair, some of them retreated and escaped. That's impossible. Many of them felt that the master was overconfident, and with such a high-intensity training, the master would be the first to collapse. Fu Zhengji was confused, but he still handed the green sword over to the master. After a long time, Fu Zhengji also grasped Master Ghostface Mask's temper. Wait a minute. Fu Zhengji stood up as usual, and when he arrived at the training grounds, he stopped in his tracks. Every soldier who entered the training grounds had their eyes twitch. Many of them rejoiced that they were not hot-headed and deserted. In that moment, the entire army was filled with trepidation. He did not know how to refine spirit treasures, and there were no star treasures required to do so. But the Sin Domain's materials were extremely unique and were completely different from the Heaven's Road, Sacred Saint Galaxy. When Fu Zhengji heard Master Ghostface Mask's unique and emotionless word for the first time, he was completely dumbstruck and only regained his senses after a few minutes, and subconsciously wanted to refute. But the shadow that Master Ghostface Mask had left in his heart was too strong. It was this intense shadow that caused him to forcefully stop himself 2 seconds before he blurted out. Tang Tian did not care about principles towards his enemies, but as long as he treated them as his comrades, he would not hesitate. Tang Tian's eyes lit up. He felt that he had grasped the crux of the problem. That's right, I am punished but not rewarded. No wonder, no wonder. Tang Tian revealed a look of understanding. If you want a horse to run, you naturally have to feed the horse. He understood this simple logic. The entire army kept quiet out of fear. Everyone secretly heaved a sigh of relief. It's truly bitter. Fu Zhengji felt that he was someone who had seen much of the world, but training every day felt as though it was a year. He had to brace himself, and in the end, he did not know how he was able to hold on. Even Jize, who spoke arrogantly and boasted that he had never suffered before, would stare blankly every day, and upon hearing the master speak of training, he would reveal a look of fear. Fu Zhengji's heart jumped. Could it be that the master has taken a fancy to my green sword? Senior Gui Wu's soul-sacrificing pearl had recorded a large number of refining methods, but Little Fool was even more proficient in it, so Tang Tian did not put it in his heart. Now that he was forced into a corner, he could only frown and see if he could recall anything. But after thinking about it, he felt that it was not possible. Master does not use swords. And Master even gave the death thumb ring to Su Yi. Why would he covet my green sword? Fu Zhengji was extremely proud. Not 2 people, not 20 people, but 200 people. 200 lost surfaces resonating. What concept is that? As long as there is a slight difference in time, it will not be completed. But the problem is, what should I reward them with? Fu Zhengji immediately became worried. Could it be that Master is disheartened because of the desertion? There's no need for that. Although there are some twists and turns, but the future of the army is bright. On the second day, it was the same. The master was even more tired. If only the silver Aquarius cabinet is here, with a mountain of star treasures and rare treasures inside. Why would I be in such a sorry state? Day after day passed. Everyone who was patiently waiting finally could not take it anymore. With that thought, it lasted for an entire night. Sin Domain's first army, thinking about the name, made him laugh until he woke up in the middle of the night. It was not only him. Even Jize, the wild and untamed bewitching blade, was extremely well-behaved and did not dare to have any temper. The 2 at the front did not make a sound, and the people below did not even dare to breathe loudly. It was not reasonable at all. Everyone saw the light of hope. 200 law surfaces resonating with each other. Tang Tian was a person who did not admit defeat, since it was a good idea, then they definitely did something wrong. But what did they do wrong? If not, they would definitely not have such an unrealistic idea. If not, even if Little Fool was here, he could casually refine a few spirit treasures and blind the eyes of these country bumpkins. Following that, Fu Zhengji's eyes congealed. He did not know what method the master used, but all of their lost surfaces were sealed by him. Fu Zhengji's heart trembled. He had never heard of a lost surface being sealed. But all of this was happening right in front of him. On the wooden poles in the distance, there were a few soldiers hanging upside down. There was no way their control could reach such a subtle level. Chapter 801. But in essence, there was no difference between the two. Tang Tian's mind trembled. He started to control the two light threads and try to link them together. Activating the awakened god armor, the chief green swords in his hands immediately became different. To him, the Sin domain was the best training ground, where he could quickly gain enlightenment on laws. Saints who gained enlightenment on laws, regardless of Heaven's Road or Sacred Saint Galaxy, were all peak experts. Without the existence of energy, they could only use the power of the physique to stimulate the power of laws. Law threads were the most basic furnaces, while law surfaces were the better furnaces, while law domains were the best furnaces. Any member of the null division, in terms of tyrannical, fleshly bodies, were the best in the Sin domain. In truth, Tang Tian did not know much about weapon refinement, but as the saying goes, a single coin stumps a hero, and he had no choice but to force a duck onto a perch. Fu Zhengji immediately became conflicted. He then asked, "Are all the treasures in the Sin domain related to laws?" His confidence came from the awakened god armor. As long as it was related to laws, it would not be able to hide from the awakened god armor. Fu Zhengji quivered. He immediately raised his head, and when he saw the scene in front of him, he was stunned. This was different from Tang Tian's understanding in the past. In his past understanding, laws did not possess any power, but the power produced from the laws. But all of this was completely subverted. The power projected by the law surface, even in Heaven's Road or Sacred Saint Galaxy, was not to be underestimated. Compared to the vast and boundless void, the light threads were naturally insignificant. But if they continued to grow, after 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, how far would the green light threads formed from laws grow? The Sin domain walked on a different path. He felt that his thoughts were not wrong. But if he wanted to improve further, he could not rely on ordinary methods. His first thought was to use laws to temper his body. He had the experience of using laws to temper his body, but that was the most basic level of law threads. Tang Tian removed the distracting thoughts from his mind. It was too early to think about the future. He once again focused on the chief green swords in front of him. The green light threads were formed from laws and were not poisonous, but the faint green mist it released was extremely poisonous. When Tang Tian's consciousness followed a green thread and extended into the spatial hole, he was shocked. But thinking about the people around him, for example, Fu Zhengji and the rest, they were all trying their best to find a breakthrough in laws, but rarely did they train their bodies. They believed that physical training had reached a bottleneck. Compared to the vast and boundless natural laws, the limits of the human body were pitifully low. To the almost eternal void, even this green sea of poisonous grass was nothing. But the saints who mistakenly entered this void would never have thought that this spectacle was actually formed by two short swords. In a corner of the void, a green sea of poisonous grass would appear. After staring blankly for a moment, Tang Tian reacted. This was the fluctuation of the laws. In the Heaven's Road that was converted into energy, the void that was not converted into energy had a different attribute, attracting countless of Heaven's Road saints. Many people did not realize that the bigger the stove, the more fuel it needed to burn. The laws were like a large furnace, and the power of the flesh and blood was the combustion. The flames formed after the combustion were the projected power of the laws. But the stove was different, and the flames it burned were different. The bigger the stove, the more intense the flames. Tang Tian's mind suddenly popped out with a brazen thought. And with a thought, he took action. Although activating the awakened god armor, Tang Tian's mind had become much clearer, but the impulse that had long been imprinted into his bones did not change. Take root in the void. In the void, the green thread was tenaciously growing deep into the void. Tang Tian could clearly feel the tenacity of the thread. That also meant the so-called power of laws still originated from the flesh and blood. It could be said that the Sin domain allowed the zero-energy body that Tang Tian had randomly created to obtain the true space to grow. Tang Tian nodded his head. The undulations of the chief green swords were obscure and hard to understand. An indescribable undulation suddenly spread out. Thinking about it, the Sin domain was not suitable for Heaven's Road's training system, but it did not mean that it was not suitable for Ursa Major Constellation. Ursa Major Constellation had the zero-energy body's training method, and after personally experiencing it, Tang Tian realized that after training in true power and then removing the energy transformation, the zero-energy body that he obtained was much stronger than the locals that grew up in the Sin domain. A question suddenly popped up in his mind. If laws were a stove, then wouldn't the stove only be able to burn the power of the flesh and blood? Could it burn energy? Tang Tian's eyes suddenly exploded with a bright light aura. His consciousness immersed into the void, and he suddenly realized that the light threads of the two short swords were truly in the same void, but they were clearly separated. They were both laws, but there was a formless and strict barrier separating the two. But what Tang Tian thought of was another matter. Tang Tian heaved a sigh of relief, as long as it was related to laws. Although he was unreliable, but he was not stupid. Since he dared to think of refining weapons, he naturally had some confidence. He carefully looked at the green swords in his hands. Tang Tian himself walked the path of refining his body and knew of the hardships involved. When the physical body reached a certain level, any improvement would become extremely difficult. Tang Tian quickly found the last two light threads in the void. And the poison had spatial attributes, and its penetrative power was extremely strong. Upon being infected, it would definitely be troublesome. Even Tang Tian, who was in the awakened god armor state, could not help but gasp in surprise. What was surprising was that the light threads that permeated the void were still growing tenaciously. Fu Zhengji did not know that Tang Tian wanted to refine weapons, but he knew that the master was extremely interested in the chief green swords. But to him, the master should be interested in treasures, and not his chief green swords. He realized that he was at a wrong place. The power projected by the lost surface was still the power of the physique. The so-called lost surface was the understanding of laws, and after the transformation of the physique, it formed the source of power. It was just that it was a level higher, transforming the tangible power of the physique into formless power. What if I used the lost surface to temper my body? It had to be said, the Sin domain martial artist physique was definitely the highest standard in the Heaven's Road Sacred Saint Galaxy. A big furnace with only a few pieces of wood burning. How can it produce a huge fire? He carefully controlled the two law threads and aligned the ends of the two law threads. The chief green swords seemed to be magnified countless of times in front of him. The dark green sword body was filled with countless of tiny holes. All of these tiny holes were like aquatic plants. They were like aquatic plants. What was shocking was that these tiny holes were actually spatial holes that led to the void. The spatial holes were filled with green threads that were densely packed together and were continuously releasing green mist. And they were like aquatic plants that swayed, causing the mist to surge as though it was flowing. The chief green swords were the Fu family's heirloom treasure and held an extraordinary meaning to the Fu family. Only with sufficient power could they support the law domain. Fu Zhengji looked at the master who was holding onto the wooden swords with his eyes closed, as though he was resting. After a long time, the master was still as a statue. Could it be that master is truly interested in the chief green swords? Is he just too embarrassed to say it? I have to give it a try if I have the chance. Chief green swords, the Fu family's heirloom treasure, was ranked 39 out of all the treasures in the Sin domain. The chief green sword were dual swords, one long and one short. The long sword was 1.5 m long, while the short sword was only 7 inches. The sword body was dark green, with a flowing luster, and the most peculiar thing was that there seemed to be a regiment of mist surging inside. Fu Zhangji immediately flattered him. Master is wise. The two law threads were slowly growing, and after a long time, the slowly growing light threads finally touched each other. Time seemed to have stopped at that moment. All of the light threads stopped moving. But very quickly, he realized that the two light threads were extremely slippery, and when he tied them to knots, they would naturally slide down and return to their original state. Tang Tian thought for a moment. Since he was unable to tie them together, then he would let them grow together. Heaven's Road's cultivation system's essence was energy transformation, and because the energy was not dense enough, Heaven's Road's cultivation system emphasized on efficiency, and its cultivation method was more exquisite. Compared to that, the sacred Saint Galaxy that was enveloped by the sea of energy was extremely dense. Thus, its cultivation method was much more open. Tang Tian was not unfamiliar with the void. The Ocean Prison Divine Sword's Ocean Prison was a unique void. In the eyes of Heaven's Road's people, the void was mysterious and unfathomable, and there were many things that were hard to understand. This was precisely because the void possessed the characteristics of spatial laws, and in Heaven's Road, where energy transformation was extremely severe, it was extremely difficult to find things with the characteristics of laws. Holding onto the two swords, an indescribable undulation surged in Tang Tian's heart. Many of the things that he did not understand in the past suddenly became clear, and Tang Tian became excited. He immediately realized that many people had misunderstood. Many people thought that to gain enlightenment on law domains, they had to spend time and effort on the furnace, thinking that with a deeper understanding of laws, they would naturally be able to gain enlightenment on law domains. But he quickly shook his head and threw that nonsensical thought to the back of his mind. Training the body and energy were two completely different systems. How could they be used together? Even with the awakened God armor activated, this conclusion made him feel depressed. Wait a minute, two short swords. The chief green sword were personally created by the Han family ancestor. In the past, the Han family ancestor had accidentally obtained a piece of wave blackwood, and logically speaking, the wave blackwood should be ordinary. But this piece of wave blackwood is buried in a layer of void mud. This void mud has an innate affinity with spatial laws, and this piece of wave blackwood also has some of the effects of spatial laws. The wave blackwood itself contains poison, and poison is a branch of life laws, and now that it has fused with spatial laws, it has produced a miraculous change. The green light threads released by the swords are extremely poisonous, and if the enemy's cultivation of laws is not deep enough, they will easily be poisoned, and it has the effect of void escape. But now, he understood that the laws that the Sin domain gained enlightenment on were mostly laws that were more compatible with the power of the physique. But the laws that he gained enlightenment on in Heaven's Road and Sacred Saint Galaxy were laws that were more compatible with energy. Why not link the two of them together? Suddenly, an indescribable undulation erupted without any warning. Chapter 802. Although they did not have any treasures in their hands, but they had a few decent weapons. Some of the weapons in their hands were just a step away from being treasures, and if it was just a little bit more, even just a little bit, they would be able to step into the realm of treasures. Ouch! Xiao Qiu, who was by the side, screamed out. He covered his face and turned to glare at Old Wang. Old Wang, why did you hit me? It was dead silent. Fu Zhangji's face changed. He was practically crawling and rolling as he flew out. If he were to be dragged in, he might be dismembered. We cannot let old Fu take all the advantages. Old by side. The training grounds that was made up of thick stone slabs suddenly stirred up sand. The thick stone slabs looked as though they were made up of sand, and upon being blown by the wind, they quickly became thinner and disappeared. With that said, the surroundings immediately quietened down. Ow! Did Master do it? The green light ball was extremely dazzling attracting everyone's attention. Layers of ripples surfaced around the master, and the indescribable undulation quickly spread out. Fu Zhengji suddenly reacted. It was a spatial undulation. Fu Zhengji suddenly threw out another short sword, and just like before, the short sword left his hand and disappeared, appearing 300 m away at the same time. Just as everyone thought that the short sword was about to explode, Fu Zhengji gently waved the other short sword in his hand, and without a sound, the short sword disappeared once again. Everyone who was initially dumbstruck had a change in expression. Many of them revealed fear in their eyes. A gust of wind. Everyone nodded their heads. Using a beauty trap? Jize came over with a curious look. It was not only him, the other members all came over as well. They had personally witnessed the commotion, and it would be a lie to say that they were not curious. Especially since many of them were natives of Sharp Wind City. How could they not know about the Chief Green Swords? Master Gu Shui will kill you. But weakening the spatial undulation was a difficult problem in the entire Sin domain. Countless people had spent countless of effort on it, but the results were not outstanding. But the spatial undulation was extremely minute, and even Fu Zhengji, who was the user, could not sense it. Master Han Bingning will kill you. Ever since he obtained the Awakened God armor, he had been enlightened on all sorts of laws, and his understanding of laws far surpassed Fu Zhengji and Jize. But what he saw today still shocked him greatly. For example, the growth of the green threads of light. The green threads of light were actually a type of law, and laws could also grow. The threads of light penetrated deep into the void. In fact, this was also a kind of fusion of laws. Lao Wang, slap me. I'm not dreaming, am I? Lao Bai mumbled to himself in a daze. I've never heard of it before, little Chio said. As if awakened from a dream, Lao Wang reacted and hurriedly apologized. It was a mistake. He needed time to digest it. In the past, the Chief Green Swords could also use spatial laws, and when he fought with Master Ghost's face mask, he relied on the spatial escape to escape. But in the past, when he used the spatial escape technique, he would release a ring of light, and there would be intense spatial fluctuations. Don't you want to snatch it? Old Wang asked. After flying for over 30 m, he stopped and looked at Master Ghost Face Mask with lingering fear. The entire camp was alarmed. The soldiers ran out and looked at the scene in front of them in shock. I don't know. Fu Zhengji's expression was sluggish. His gaze was completely attracted to the big and small green balls of light in Master's hands. The ripples that continued to spread out in the air originated from the two balls of light. Even a poor ghost needs to have dreams. Little Chio was unconvinced. Are those still my Chief Green Swords? The one who spoke was Fu Zhengji. His expression was strange. Kneel at Master's door? Someone suggested. To any cultivator, the chaotic space was extremely terrifying. The chaos lasted for an entire hour before it ended, and the Chief Green Swords retracted their light auras. The light auras released by the Chief Green Swords became even more dazzling, and the spatial undulations became even more intense. Tang Tian's body was lifted off the ground and floated in the air. Master will hack you to death. You're richer than Master? And what if it becomes a treasure? That is a qualitative leap. Everyone turned their heads, and as expected, Master Jize was nowhere to be seen. But does the Chief Green Swords have some other benefits that I have yet to discover? The intense undulations meant that the space around them was extremely chaotic. Everyone was silent. Even Fu Zhengji was shocked. He was dumbstruck. Everyone's eyes turned red again. That's right, Master can even upgrade treasures. Then wouldn't it be even easier for the weapons in our hands? Fu Zhengji was awoken by the abnormally loud, "I've earned big," and immediately reacted. Without saying a word, he grabbed onto his Chief Green Swords and anxiously ran away. After carefully experiencing the undulations of the sword body, Fu Zhengji suddenly raised the short sword in his left hand and gently threw it out. Everyone were not amateurs. How could they not know how powerful it was? This fighting method was most commonly used for assassinations and was impossible to guard against. And what was worse was that they actually did not sense any spatial undulations. which meant that it was almost impossible to sense. Possessing both poison and spatial attributes, it was not as simple as 1 plus 1. Old Fu, come, let us brothers experience it. Old Bai scoffed. Master said it's definitely a treasure? None of us have any treasures, but who doesn't have a few suitable weapons? Even if it can't be upgraded to Old Fu's level, but can be upgraded, and that will be a huge gain. Everyone's faces changed. They had been training in the training grounds every day and knew how big it was. It was a standard square training ground, with a length and width of 3 kilometers, and was paved with stone slabs that were 1.5 m thick. The chief green swords were the Fu family's heirloom treasure, and since he was young, it had landed in his hands. After using it for so many years, he was extremely familiar with the chief green swords. But the chief green swords had never produced such a strange phenomenon. Could it be that the swords are actually able to pick people? Fu Zhengji waved his hand, and the sea of green mist that enveloped the entire training grounds suddenly disappeared. The green mist came without any warning and disappeared without any warning. Everyone who originally had a huge change in expression became even more dumbstruck. He was immersed in shock and did not know that the entire camp was in an uproar. Yes, the surrounding people shouted out in unison. Old Bai also reacted and laughed. I'm not dreaming. Old Fu has earned big this time. In the next moment, the training grounds 800 meters away suddenly exploded with a green mist. Do you guys want to fall? Old Bai turned and asked. The smaller the spatial undulation, the more concealed it was, and the more powerful it was. The density of the green mist did not decrease at all, as though it was a sea of green mist. Furthermore, there was poison. He then understood why there was a sandstorm. The entire training grounds was completely corroded and became extremely loose. The chief green swords and master ghost face mass hands suddenly released a dazzling light aura, forming into one big and one small green ball of light. As soon as this thought popped up, it exuded a fatal temptation. At their position, all of them had some wealth, and ordinary money was unable to move them. But for treasures that could not be bought with money, they were unable to reject them. The short swords that they threw out disappeared. The spatial undulation was something that any martial artist that trained in spatial laws hoped to reduce. I never thought that master would have such a move. Old Bai sighed. Wind laws were common, and someone immediately pointed to the training grounds, causing a gust of wind to blow. You have a treasure? Old Wang asked. Huh. Then I can only use men. The green mist spread out extremely quickly. In the blink of the eye, it had enveloped the entire training grounds. Look at Old Fu's terrified look. It's as though we will snatch it. Old Bai was unhappy. The heart-palpitating spatial undulation was faintly discernible. Upon thinking about that, Fu Zhengji became excited. But his heart immediately became anxious. If Master did not fancy the Chief Green Sword from before, then will Master be interested in the current Chief Green Swords that have increased in power? Tang Tian landed on the ground and threw the Chief Green Swords to Fu Zhengji. Go and think about it yourself. Ji Zhe was knowledgeable, and with one look, he could tell that the needle-like holes were the effects of spatial laws. But with such a large amount and such a large area, he would never have thought of it. Furthermore, there was poison. Master Qian, Fu Zhengji's heart dropped. He caught it and said with gratitude, Thank you, Master. Unfathomable. Old Wang said. Master Ji Zhe also fell. Xiao Qiu said. The appearance of the Chief Green Swords had some changes. The originally reserved dark green luster had turned jade green, like a jadeite. The sword's body was covered with dark green rhombus patterns. It was simple and unadorned. At the end of the sword hilt, there was an additional circle, where a few extremely fine strands of hair were tied to the circles, floating like water plants. But the most peculiar thing was that these fine strands were faintly discernible. Old Wang, who was equally absent-minded, replied with an "oh" and waved his hand. That's right. If you keep falling, you will fall into a pile of dog shit. Old Wang said. Ji Zhe's body flashed and appeared in the training grounds. Upon landing, he actually entered the stone floor. He bent down with a serious expression. The stone floor was filled with countless of tiny holes, densely packed, as though it had been eaten by ants. It was extremely soft. "We've earned big." The people around him nodded their heads in unison and sighed in unison. There were only a few tins of treasures, although the weapons in their hands were of high quality, but the difference in might was like heaven and earth. They knew their own strength, the weapons in their hands, not to mention being upgraded. Even if they were upgraded by a bit, their value would increase exponentially. If you don't do your job properly, you will be hung up and beaten by master. Someone immediately snorted. He was overwhelmed with shock. Everyone could not help but click their tongues in wonder. On another target in the training grounds, there was a cloud of dust, and a fist-sized hole could be seen. It had been pierced through. Countless of thoughts circled around in his mind. He did not even greet them, and with a flash, he disappeared. Fu Zhengji was also filled with curiosity. The shock in Fu Zhengji's heart became even more intense. The undulations from the chief green swords became extremely unfamiliar. If not for the entire process happening right in front of his eyes, he would never believe that the two swords in his hands were his own chief green swords. "What's going on?" Jize asked with a look of suspicion. Everyone started to think on how to make the master take action. His mind was in a daze, buzzing. Everyone's eyes were red, their gazes never leaving Fu Zhengji's fleeing back. Chapter 803. Jize knew something was wrong and quickly chased after him. "It's not a small matter. It's not a small matter." Tang Tian coughed lightly. "I have an important task for you. Law threads are not living things. Could it be that their growth requires similar nourishment?" Tang Tian completely ignored Jize, who had a solemn expression on his face. It was as if someone sent him a pillow when he was about to doze off. He was lacking a research subject, and Jize sent his bewitching blade over. What a good person. Other than raising the Null Division's fighting capabilities, it was also extremely beneficial to Tang Tian's own fighting capabilities. The godlike young man didn't like doing things he wasn't good at. If it was an ordinary person, faced with such a terrifying workload, they would inevitably feel discouraged, not to mention that this was only a guess. Tang Tian was not discouraged at all. On the contrary, he was filled with enthusiasm. If these problems could be solved, then the awakened god armors would definitely become stronger. Come, your excellency, come quickly. If it is, then what is the nourishment for the law threads to grow? He thought of the chief green sword. Could it be the black inkwood? It was possible. Didn't that mean that every law required different nutrients? The Null Division situation was even more beneficial to the army. As soon as he left the room, Jize, who had been waiting outside, strode forward and said, "Sir, this subordinate wants to let you take a look at this saber." When the Null Division started to train in laws, Tang Tian had some discoveries. The laws that the Null Division members gained enlightenment on were the most commonly seen and easiest to train in. However, words that had been spoken were like water that had been spilled. There was no point in regretting it this time. It was as if he had eaten yellow lotus in his mouth, and his heart was filled with bitterness. He pitifully said, "Sir, please don't scare me. Sir, you have a great family business. How can this lowly one compare?" Jize immediately flattered. Jize was stunned. He had prepared a bunch of sure-kill techniques to curry favor, but he hadn't even used them yet. Just like that, it worked. But he quickly reacted and quickly offered his demon blade. "Master, you can do whatever you want." How many types of laws were there? No one knew. They were as vast as the stars in the sky, and that was one of the reasons why the Sin domain lacked exploration. The Sin domain's laws were like a sea of gems, and any random pick would be a dazzling gem. To a large-scale army, there were no benefits to having too many types. A single specialization meant that more cooperation was needed. Only then would they be able to face complex situations. Tang Tian's face was full of disdain. "Look at your cowardly face. Sir, please ask for instructions." Jize groaned weakly. If it was damaged, seeing Jize disappear like a gust of wind, Tang Tian was extremely satisfied. What good worker. If he really broke it, Jize stared blankly at Darren. "Darren, do you think this is a restaurant ordering? A little of each." Do you know how many kinds of raw materials there are? Are you joking? The godlike young man did not like this place at all. I don't even have a weapon when I commit suicide. Why do they grow? A real man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. Might cannot be bent. Riches and honor must be obscene. Tang Tian didn't see it that way. Find nourishment for the law threads. Tang Tian had no idea what was going on outside. He was immersed in his own world. Ji Zhe quivered. His eyes immediately turned red, as though he was injected with chicken blood. This subordinate will do it now. The flattering smile on Ji Zhe's face caused the other members who were watching from afar to feel disgusted. This strange phenomenon, if it was the first time Tang Tian entered the Sin domain, he would definitely find it strange. But now, Tang Tian did not find it strange. Out of all the places he had been to, the Sin domain was the place he disliked the most. It was a pool of stagnant water. Not only did they lose the courage to fight, they also lost the courage to expand. Ever since they were born, it was as though they were waiting to grow old. They had no motivation to explore, no motivation to create. The Chief Green Sword's law threads were fused with the spatial attribute. Tang Tian understood the value of this. In the Sin domain, martial artists could only train in one type of law. The Sin domain generally believed that one should not bite off more than one could chew. A single law would allow a martial artist to gain enlightenment on the true meaning of the law. Tang Tian pretended not to hear it. Go get some materials to make weapons. Just a small matter. Ji Zhe nodded his head and bowed. Ancestors, please don't crawl out to look for your disciple. Ji Zhe's face fell. He drooped his head. His heart was filled with endless regret, and he wanted to give himself 2 tight slaps on the head. Greed has blinded me. I have been completely blinded by greed. Ji Zhe calmed down. Master is rich and overbearing. He must have a rich family background. Under the awakened god armor, his understanding of laws was extremely sharp. But in the void of the Chief Green Swords, to allow 2 independent law threads to grow together, it created an incomparable impact on him. A bit of everything. Hearing that it was a small matter, Tang Tian waved his hand and said, "Don't look for me for small matters. I'm very busy." Tang Tian was annoyed. "Speak, what is it?" "Drop what?" Old Bai did not react. The awakened god armor contains countless laws. This workload, a bit of everything. Tang Tian waved his hand. But very quickly, he realized that his law threads were not growing. Under what circumstances will law threads grow? He carefully recalled the scene of the Chief Green Sword's law threads growing in the void. Can I do it the same way? Tang Tian agreed with that notion, but a single law was not without its drawbacks, and that was its limitations. It was not that there were no people in Heaven's Road who only trained in one martial technique, but very few did it. So what if I smile a little? He shook his head, and threw all the distracting thoughts to the back of his mind. It was not something he needed to consider. The coordination of a single specialization was a meticulous task, and to this godlike young lad, it was too complicated. Maybe Bing is interested in this topic, or maybe Tang Cho knows it too. The most important foundation for growth was nourishment, and all growth was inseparable from nourishment. Thinking about his own awakened god armor, the god armor was actually formed from a large number of law threads. But all of these law threads were messy and disorderly. Tang Tian had once thought of sorting them out. He felt that it was the key to upgrading the awakened god armor, but he could not find a way to sort out the law threads. That's true. Tang Tian was elated. He patted Ji Zhe's shoulder with a look of responsibility. Don't worry, I will be careful. If I really break it, Tang Tian glanced at him. The more types, the more benefits it will bring to your bewitching blade. He had been a boss for so long, and his way of thinking was vastly different from ordinary people. For example, he would think of the possibility of a large-scale promotion. He was no longer a loner. He who sat on the Ursa Major constellation and the Shan continent was definitely an overlord. Then you can only count yourself unlucky. Tang Tian said with a matter-of-fact expression. Ji Zhe's heart tensed up, his face turning white. Oh my God, how did I forget about that? But he was extremely interested in this discovery. Treasures were extremely precious in the Sin domain, and there were only a few of them that had names. Treasures were rare objects that could not be bought with money, and no one had ever heard of treasures being able to increase in power. If the news were to be released, the entire Sin domain would not be able to sit still. All of the old demons, which one of them did not have any good things in their hands. The small camp would most likely be squeezed to the point of bursting. He looked at Tang Tian anxiously. The pitiful look of anticipation in his eyes was extremely heartbreaking. 3 to 5 types of laws could be promoted on a large scale, and once they could be fused, it meant that there would be many changes. The things that the Sin domain people did not care about allowed Tang Tian to obtain the treasures. It was not strange. Before the Null Division members trained in the zero-energy bodies, their strengths were extremely low, and towards the so-called laws, they were all stuck at the most superficial level. On this point, they were completely incomparable to the Sin domain people who had been influenced since young. For people like Su Yi and the rest, they would be surprised at the Null Division members' enlightenment on laws, but they were all common goods with very few types, and thus many people did not think much of it. You succeeded. Jizai also succeeded. Xiao Qiu was extremely excited. The 2 identical law threads growing together in the void gave him a huge inspiration. We'll be fine if I break it. Master, what materials do you need? Jizai asked weakly. Jizai did not mind at all, so what if he smiled a little? Bewitching Blade was his nickname, and also the name of his blade. The Chief Greensword was one of the lower-ranked treasures, and was on a completely different level from his Bewitching Blade. But after being tossed around by the Master, the might of it caused his heart to turn cold. It was even stronger than his Bewitching Blade. But in the Sin domain, Tang Tian could not see any teamwork. The members who were watching from afar could not hear the conversation between the two, but when they saw Tang Tian accept Jizai's Bewitching Blade and Jizai leave with an excited look, everyone immediately became excited. Because battles were usually complicated, one sword to break all techniques sounded tyrannical, but to be able to do it was an extremely difficult thing. The majority of martial artists would choose to train in one main martial technique and train in a few support martial techniques to face different situations. Tang Tian rushed out of the room. He could not wait any longer. Tang Tian had a completely different way of thinking. In Heaven's Road, all of the martial techniques, all of the cultivation techniques were created by generations after generations of seniors. It was a slow process of accumulation, and pure energy did not have any value. All of the changes were the blood, sweat, and tears of generations after generations. He himself was the most classic example. His current realm had long surpassed the past by many times, and he had seen countless of martial techniques, but to this day, the only martial techniques that were still useful were fundamental martial techniques. Laws were born with no lack of changes. That was what the Sin domain people thought. To their understanding, in a vast sea of laws, they would definitely be able to find the laws they needed. They completely did not need to consider the fusion of laws and only needed to find the laws they wanted. The Bewitching Blade had an extraordinary origin. It was created by his ancestor, and after a few generations of perfection and nourishment, it became what it was today. But Tang Tian did not even look at it. Give it to me. Growth was the most common phenomenon of life, and all life forms, from the moment they were born, would never stop growing. A pile of dog shit. Xiao Qiu had a look of envy. Tang Tian was surprised and stopped. Is something the matter? Chapter 804. The adults must have done it on a whim, just like a child suddenly becoming interested in something. It was inevitable that they would toss and turn. It's not strange that Master has a pure heart and a bit of naivety. Tang Tian didn't understand. The Chief Greensword's law threads were poison, and were similarly a branch of life laws. They swayed like water plants, producing poison, but did not produce any spirit aura. It was a very strange phenomenon. Tang Tian was immersed in it, activating the awakened god armor. The Bewitching Blade in front of him seemed to have changed. The long and narrow blade became faint, and what appeared in front of him was a pool of bewitching blood. No, more accurately, it was countless of red law threads. They intertwined and weaved, slowly flowing and squirming, as though they were alive. As expected of the Demon Blade, the Null Division's recent achievements were truly glorious. They were invincible. If the battles with the small families were not enough to convince them, then the battles with the 4 list of powerhouses martial artists caused the entire Sin domain to shake. For a list of powerhouses martial artists, such a fighting strength placed in the Sin domain was enough to destroy a city. The law of blood. Many people thought that although the Null Division might not be able to fight against the 4 main cities, but if the 4 main cities wanted to deal with them, they would have to pay a huge price. This point of view was currently trending in the Sin domain, and the price of the Null Division prisoners rose once again. It was just that this time, no one dared to use the Null Division prisoners as coolies. But the 4 main cities did not give up on the Null Division. Compared to the excited spectators and the orderly Null Division, the bandits that gathered from all over had a much worse atmosphere. Duca did not approve of dealing with the Null Division, but he did not oppose it either. Inside the middle courtyard, the voices to kill the Null Division were extremely loud, and he did not plan to suppress them. Furthermore, he was also extremely interested in the way armies fought and wanted to see where the Null Division's limits were. I wonder if there are any today. Sigh, these bandits are really too much. Why aren't they working harder? Are they worthy of us who wake up early and sleep late? He admired the master's strength and courage, but a military general was a different system. Without many years of study and training, it would be hard to even touch the door. The army was actually so strong. Nietschio laughed, but did not comment. He was after all from the Leo constellation, and according to the standard, he was not a direct descendant. Of course, that was not the case in the eyes of others. To be able to control the Null Division, it showed how much trust Master has in him. What this barbarian bull said was completely correct. People were forced to do so. Some of the fellows who thought they had figured it out rushed back excitedly. In this period of time, the newly formed armies were like bamboo shoots after the rain, continuously appearing. Which powerhouse doesn't have an army? They would be embarrassed to greet others when they go out. In his heart, he only laughed at the idea of the master forming an army. The blade was long and narrow, with a touch of crimson blood flowing slowly along the cold blade. The indescribable demonic coldness was mixed with coldness, like a blood-eyed red snake lying silently in the darkness. If he couldn't win or escape, then he would just drag it out. There were also voices in the Null Division that wanted to take advantage of the victory, but they were suppressed by Nietschio. On one hand, it was because he did not receive Tang Tian's orders, and on the other hand, Nietschio was not blinded by victory. Currently, the Null Division's standard of strength was extremely wide, and the members that were rescued first had experienced the most battles. Their strength had improved the fastest, and their understanding of tactics was also the deepest. But the members that returned later still needed time. Since we can only wait, come, try the tea that I brought, drink it slowly, and wait patiently. With that, the situation stabilized, and everyone calmed down. Good morning, my brother. Rain or shine will not stop you. The Galloping Horse City actually displayed a rare piece. The understanding of blood was not only limited to the Sin domain. In Heaven's Road, there were many martial techniques that could incite the power of blood. At times, he would even purposely go easy on them and act as though he was exhausted or heavily injured, so as to not scare the bandits away. But even so, their recent achievements were so brilliant that they scared many people who were spying on them in the dark. People who were familiar with Tang Tian knew that his personality and emotions were extremely unstable. All sorts of weird and unimaginable things, to him, were just like having a meal. Of course, the rich and overbearing families would directly sit on boats and look down on the entire battlefield. It was Tang Tian's first time seeing blood laws, and he carefully observed the densely packed law threads. Blood laws was a branch of life laws. Blood existed in a large number of living beings and was an indispensable part of them, as it contained powerful strength and miraculous effects. The people that were wiped out by the Null Division were not nameless people, as many of the infamous bandits had fallen at the foot of the Galloping Horse City. The bewitching aura was produced by the squirming of the dark red law threads. Why is that? This sort of exchange happened every day, even in mountain peaks opposite the Galloping Horse City, where they had a good view, were guarded by servants. All of the smart peddlers and merchants took advantage of the opportunity to sell their food, and actually had good business. Interesting. If we were to say that previously there were still many people who were skeptical, then the improvement of the bandits made everyone understand that the Sin domain was about to enter the era of armies. In other people's eyes, the Null Division was in a precarious situation, but Nietschio was willing to endure it. To him, the intensity of the bandits' attacks could not compare to the 4 list of powerhouses martial artists. The surroundings of the Galloping Horse City became even more bustling, and after fighting for so many days, the hatred with the Null Division could not be resolved. The Galloping Horse Meat Grinder was a good representation of everyone's feelings towards the past few days of fighting. Every day, they would send out a small group to pretend to fight, and upon seeing that something was amiss, they would run. After a while, they would change to another group of people and do the same. Tang Tian was surprised. The blade did not have a spirit, but it had an aura similar to that of a living being. He had only sensed such an aura from star treasures. The Sin domain did not have any living beings, and although they were both treasures, the chief green swords did not have such an aura. The Galloping Horse Meat Grinder had a profound effect on the entire Sin domain, and every battle would be watched by countless people. Almost every powerhouse would send out their own people to watch the battles. In other words, it was not a good time to start a battle. They still needed to accumulate strength. Jizei's bewitching blade was extremely unique. It would be weird if he didn't use it, Han Bingming said indifferently. The bandits did not lack capable people, and after witnessing their companions being defeated, they started to take the initiative to change. They started to imitate the Null Division's tactics and techniques, although they could not be compared to the Null Division, but the atmosphere was completely different. Even the scene of fighting against the Null Division had become much more interesting. Many people thought that the Null Division would take the opportunity to attack, but who knew that they would actually bide their time in Galloping Horse City. However, these guys who lived on the edge of a knife were all as cunning as ghosts. Nietschio, who was well aware of the fickleness of the human world, naturally understood the value and difficulty of such trust. It was not a difficult thing for a scholar to die for someone who understood him, and Nietschio, who had long regarded Tang Tian as a wise leader, did not even wish to speak ill of him. He must definitely be jealous of our achievements. IMO Li was very proud of himself, and his flaunting attitude flowed out from his fierce face. I know Crazy Tang too well. That must be it. Haha, this time, he's going to eat the dust behind us. The more battles, the greater the pressure, the more the Null Division would be forced to bring out their true abilities, and that was what he was truly interested in. If they were to retreat, it would be equivalent to offending the 2 biggest powerhouses in the Sin domain, and they would not be able to survive in the future. Everyone was in a difficult position and could only bite the bullet. Amauri was startled for a moment, then muttered, "Crazy Tang is building an army? He must be crazy again." Although the majority of the powerhouses firmly believed that the Null Division was not a match for the 4 main cities, and chose to bide their time and watch from the sidelines. But there were a few small powerhouses that sent the Null Division prisoners to Galloping Horse City. So battles can be fought like that. The others naturally could not be as carefree as Amauri. They still had to be respectful towards the master. But as for who won or lost, he did not care at all, since he would win in the end. The others were envious. The name Crazy Tang was not something that anyone could casually call him. The friendship of the past could never be replaced. Others might feel that they were more valuable to the master, but it was difficult for them to obtain such closeness. Isn't frequent and low-intensity battles the best way to train an army? I heard that Master has also built an army. Suyi laughed. He had a breakthrough in his realm, and his entire aura had become even more calm, his gaze becoming deep. I wonder how it is now. After continuous defeats, the Galloping Horse City was like a bottomless pit. No one knew how many lives had been lost, but they were still unable to see the end. Although everyone was imitating the Null Division, and their fighting strength had increased, but they were still unable to defeat the Null Division. What was worse was that they were unable to retreat. They were recruited by the four main cities with a large sum of money, and if they were to retreat, they would completely offend the four main cities. Brother, you're truly well prepared. Nothing was more convincing than that. In the past, the Sin domain lacked the motivation to advance, because the structure of the Sin domain was too stable to the point that it lacked vitality. But Tang Tian, who appeared out of nowhere, brought his Null Division and completely destroyed the building that was starting to decay. The more he thought about it, the more excited Amaury became. Ever since the two of them knew each other, he had always been suppressed by Crazy Tang, and he would never let go of any opportunity to mock Crazy Tang. No one would be willing to face such a weapon. With Du Ku's tacit approval, the Galloping Horse City had recently suffered wave after wave of attacks. Bandits from all over the place seemed to have gone crazy and continued to attack the Galloping Horse City. But the Null Division, led by Nie Chio, quickly displayed astonishing strength and defeated the enemies time and time again. The Bewitching Blade's blood laws were extremely powerful. As long as it touched a drop of the enemy's blood, it could control and influence the enemy's blood to a certain degree. That also meant that as long as it cut a wound, you would lose control of the blood in your body. It could also absorb the enemy's blood and transform the absorbed blood into pure life force to nourish the user, which was also a terrifying attribute. Under the activation of the Awakened God armor, his understanding of laws was extremely profound, but at the moment, he was unable to comprehend the profoundness behind it. From this point, it was reasonable for the Bewitching Blade to be ranked higher than the Chief Greensword. As for what to do with the army, the Galloping Horse City was the only place to go. That's right, it would be a pity to miss it. Tang Tian's interest was piqued. He activated the Awakened God armor and carefully observed the Bewitching Blade. Chapter 805. Looks like I have to train harder. A dazzling blood red dot of light lit up at the tip of the saber without any warning. The proud and arrogant Zhong Li Bai saw Sima Xiao, and his face became as black as a pot. This is your plan? The bandits were very satisfied with the current situation. Not only did they not violate their deal with the four main cities, they could also avoid losing too much of their strength. Once the time was up, they could take their payment and leave. As for whether or not the four main cities would go back on their word, no one was worried about it, as this operation had gathered almost 90% of the bandits in the entire Sin domain. Even the four main cities would have to consider the consequences of offending everyone. Holding the demon blade, the blood screen in front of him was another scene in his eyes. The expanding dark red light swept past everyone's bodies and turned into a red curtain of blood that enveloped everyone. Everyone felt as if they were immersed in a pool of viscous blood. Everything they saw was blood red, and the thick and demonic smell of blood permeated every corner. In the blood curtain, there is a strange power that seemed to be everywhere, but when one looked carefully, it was difficult to find a trace of it. The scarlet saber blade looked like the afterglow of the setting sun. The strange demonic aura disappeared, replaced by a gentle and gentle aura, without any hint of coldness. In fact, he had nowhere else to go other than staying here. At this time, he couldn't retreat even if he wanted to. With so many bandits gathered together, if he wanted to retreat, it was very likely that the other pirates would gang up on him. The tacit understanding between Galloping Horse City and the bandits left the higher-ups of the four main cities exasperated, but helpless. Compared to the bandits, Zhong Li Bai had a deeper understanding of armies. When he turned to look at Master Ghost's face mask, he was suddenly stunned. How could the sword genius in front of him live up to the name Sword Genius? Not the least bit demonic. Don't move for now. Sima Xiao thought for a moment. Dooku has already started to establish an army. With Dooku's pride, how can he tolerate his own army being weaker than others? He would definitely let his army defeat the Null Division. Regardless of what Dooku was thinking at that time, after winning against the Null Division, the mid-family would definitely take action. You, as a spy, will only be able to display your true usefulness at that time. Tang Tian was very pleased with himself, but with Grimace's mask covering his face, The team members couldn't see his face at all. Yes, yes. Let us broaden our horizons. Bandits had no rules to speak of. Don't think that Zhong Libai had caused so much trouble previously, but in the world of bandits, he was still a rookie, and when compared to the veteran bandits, he did not attract any attention. And Zhong Libai's terrible individual strength made others look down on him. In many people's eyes, this was a group of low-level bandits. Ji was a little nervous. A treasure like the bewitching blade, if it was broken, it would not be easy to find a replacement. He held onto the bewitching blade and tried to swing it a few times. He felt that the blade was slightly lighter, but it was extremely smooth. When he injected his energy into the bewitching blade, he was stunned. His eyes revealed a look of disbelief. Ji suddenly realized the hidden meaning behind Master Ghostface Mask's words. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. It was so quiet around Ji that even a pin drop could be heard. This is not a law domain. More accurately, this is not a true law domain. Every single one of his comrades was like a lump of blood. He could clearly feel their pulse beating and see the flow of their blood. Even the blood vessels that were thinner than a strand of hair could be seen clearly in his eyes. In his eyes, there were no secrets, and he was sure that as long as he willed it, he could cause anyone's blood to flow backwards. Even Ji, who had his eyes on the top of his head, was overwhelmed with shock. He and Sima Xiangshan had finally gotten to a good position with much difficulty, and were bestowed with heavy responsibilities. Especially when the task of bribing the bandits to deal with Ghostface Mask was handed over to Sima Xiao, the two of them thought that their chance had come. This feeling isn't right. If a single treasure can create a law domain, how terrifying will that be? Domain. The bandit's improvement was not even worth mentioning in his eyes. What truly caught his attention was the Null Division's improvement. Personally witnessing the Null Division's formation going from rusty to proficient, seeing the Null Division's rapid growth in Yechio's hands, his mood became extremely terrible. I'm looking forward to it. Speaking of which, Sima Zhao's chest was also extremely tight. There was nothing worse than this feeling. Zhong Libai's interest was lacking, but he did not say anything. Sima Xiao waved his hands indifferently. Who would have thought that Dooku would actually be interested in an army? The majority of the authority in the middle courtyard is in Dooku's hands. If he does not say anything, what can these people do? They can only make loud noises, but no action. Tang Tian saw Ji Zai's suspicious expression and laughed, but did not say anything. The bewitching blade's transformation was for him to figure out himself. Through the bewitching blade's transformation, Tang Tian had benefited greatly, even more than the Chief Greenswords. Law Domain represented the highest level of power of laws, the ultimate power that could destroy the heavens and earth. Zhong Libai secretly made up his mind. Luckily for the bandits, all of them were thinking of ways to imitate the Null Division, and the scene of them training their troops was extremely normal. The bandits who were initially clamoring to slaughter the entire Galloping Horse City were now playing with their skills and did not know what to do. Tang Tian's voice broke the silence, but for some reason, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. The indescribable fear disappeared. They gradually regained their senses, and their pale faces regained some color. Zhong Libai's expression also became solemn. Sima Zhao's words were not just to scare them. If the Sin Domain truly found a way to form an army, then their only advantage would be lost. The Sin Domain's manpower and resources were not something a mere Null Division could contend against. The members all opened their eyes wide. The majority of them did not understand, but there were a few who had higher comprehension abilities and revealed looks of contemplation. But every single one of them were like obedient students, listening attentively, not concealing their reverence. The members were not weak, but they were not famous experts. To them, the Law Domain was a distant and unattainable legend. They stared blankly at the blood screen, their minds blank. Wait a minute. It's not a true Law Domain. Even Ji could not imagine it. He heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he felt a sense of loss. A Law Domain, it is a power that everyone yearns for even in their dreams. But he quickly regained his composure. His determination was much firmer than any ordinary martial artist, and quickly became alert to his own state of mind. Even Duke, who wants to form an army, do you think the others won't? Sima Xiao retracted his smile, and his face became serious. This will be our last battle in the Sin domain. If we win, we will kill our way back to the sacred Saint Galaxy, and, at the very least, no one in the Sin domain will be our opponent. But if we lose, we will die without a burial ground. No matter how strong the Null Division is, how can they contend against the entire Sin domain? And furthermore, the Sin domain that has developed armies? Everything was in his control, and an indescribable intoxication surfaced in his heart. Nietzsche was his most direct competitor, and the two of them had similar backgrounds and backgrounds. The Null Division was gradually forming, but he himself was unable to do anything. When Jizé once again held onto his bewitching blade, he was startled. No one could imagine it. The initial stage of the plan was going smoothly, but the two of them never thought that Dooku would actually not take the initiative to deal with Ghostface Mask. The split in the higher-ups of the Midland family was unexpected. They had underestimated Nietzsche's speed in consolidating the Null Division, and the four list of powerhouse's martial artists were defeated, causing all of the bandits to be shocked. Master Jizé, try out your blade. If the weapon's power surpasses mine, then I will become its slave. Is this a domain? What a joke, even if it is not a true law domain. But the level of research has already touched upon a law domain. What does that mean? It means that Master's understanding of laws is already at the peak of the Sin domain. Instead, through the mask, his voice became even more gloomy. Every treasure was a fierce beast, and if one did not have enough power to subdue it, then they would be torn to shreds. Their original plan immediately became full of holes. The one who came to discuss a deal with him previously was Sima Xiao. Initially, it was agreed that Zhong Libai would mix into the bandits and act as a spy, but who knew that he would fall into such an awkward situation? This is an imitation of a law domain, or more accurately, it can be called an incomplete domain. This blood screen is formed from blood laws. We all know that the realms of laws are separated into law threads, law surfaces, and law domains. But how do they evolve? When I was researching on the Bewitching Blade, I realized something strange. Law surfaces are actually formed from law threads. So, how can a rope become a flat surface? Everyone has seen a straw mat before. How can a line become a space? That is a cage made of grass. This Bewitching Blade uses this method to imitate a similar space. Then I can only stay here, Zhong Libai snorted. Previously, everyone thought that the Galloping Horse City was a piece of fat meat, and were fighting to be the first, and Zhong Libai had no chance. And ever since both parties started to fight tacitly, the bandits realized that it was the best opportunity to learn, and Zhong Libai was unable to find a chance to fight. He had many subordinates, but none of them were experts, and they were very undisciplined, despite him being strict with his training. But compared to the Null Division members who were extremely disciplined, they were too far apart. Their discipline was lacking, and their strength was lacking. The reason why the Null Division could be so arrogant and confident to resist against the bandits was because of their strength. Zhong Libai did not have the strength, and naturally did not dare to act recklessly in the place where the bandits gathered. There was a trembling exclamation, and it was unknown who had shouted it. Everyone who had already guessed what was going on immediately had their faces wiped clean. It was a law domain, the legendary law domain, and only Duke who was able to do it. The red light spot quickly expanded like a balloon, expanding frantically. The others had long surrounded them. But not all the bandits were satisfied. For example, Zhong Libai, he was not satisfied at all. Chapter 806. It was not a lie. Although Tang Tian had never been a military general before, but under Bing's influence, he knew that the formation of an army was not an easy task. How could the Sin domain, who was used to fighting alone, accept the fighting style of an army so easily? When Tang Tian heard that, he immediately took off his mask and corrected him. My surname is not Gui. I am called Tang Tian. Dooku. It was no wonder that Fu Zhangji was in a daze. Dooku's position in the hearts of the Sin Domain people was something that Tang Tian could never imagine. And Dooku's formation of an army was so powerful that it caused people to be stupefied. Compared to it, their side was like a small fry. Duke gave a silly smile. We're a family from now on. Relax. Brothers' matters will be old dues matters in the future. I have already asked the various cities to send brother subordinates to Galloping Horse City. Tang Tian was startled. Although we brothers had some friction in the past, but that is nothing. We won't get to know each other if we don't fight. Dooku revealed a harmless expression. But the two of us have no conflict of interest. The people below will think that brother is trying to steal their rice bowls. But old Du knows that the Sin Domain will not tolerate brother, and brother will eventually return to the sacred Saint Galaxy. Ow! How is that possible? Jize, who was being stared at by everyone, regained his senses. Seeing everyone's jealous, envious, and unkind gazes, his straight back became like a cooked noodle and immediately became soft. He nodded his head and bowed. This subordinate was too happy, and let it get to my head. Really? Tang Tian was suspicious. This can't go on. The blurry light figure was clearly in front of him, but he could not sense its existence, as though he had seen a ghost in broad daylight. A bone-chilling, intense surge from his feet. Dooku was also sizing up Tang Tian with interest, and suddenly laughed. Brother Gue, can you take off your mask? Could it be that I am not familiar with the new bewitching blade? Fu Zhengji and Jize looked at Tang Tian in shock. When he finished, Dooku's expression became sinister. The entire Sin Domain and Honorable Martial Continent are mortal enemies. Dooku's tone was calm. Many people think that Old Du's army is to deal with my brother, but they do not know that Old Du only has one goal, and that is to return to the sacred Saint Galaxy. For the sake of rushing out of the Sin Domain, countless people had died, but no one succeeded. My teacher died on it. My grandfather died on it. I knew that the previous methods didn't work. All these years, I've been trying to figure out a way to get out of this damn place. It wasn't until Galloping Horse City that I understood. An army. Only an army can allow us to charge out. Tang Tian turned and looked at Fu Zhengzhong in confusion. The light screen gradually shrunk, and everyone felt that the bright red field of vision was receding like the tide. Where the hell did this stupid-looking guy pop out from? Fu Zhengji and the rest did not dare disobey Tang Tian's orders, but with their morale at rock bottom, the training's effect was obvious. Now it was all gone. Fu Zhengji and Jize looked at each other. Their faces were in a mess. They felt that the scene in front of them was extremely strange. Shouldn't the two of them draw their swords at each other without saying a word? Why are they addressing each other as brothers? What's going on? Master Ghostface Mask is actually just a blurry light image. Dooku looked at Tang Tian. Can old Du ask a few more questions? Brother, are you an enemy or a friend of the Honorable Martial Continent? This young man is still trying to grasp the lost surface resonance. Jize's back immediately perspired with perspiration. He immediately replied, It's true, it's true. Dooku looked at Tang Tian's face and was surprised. I never thought that Mr. Tang would actually be so young. So be it. There's no need to be so anxious. He looked at Fu Zhengji with a look of suspicion. No one paid attention to the Null Division in Galloping Horse City. No one paid attention to Ghostface Mask in Sharp Wind City. The entire Sin Domain's eyes were on Du City. All of the higher-ups who initially tried to control the mid-family kept quiet out of fear. No one dared to voice out any objections. He was truly shocked. It was not only him. Fu Zhengji and Jize, who were by the side, were completely dumbstruck. The two of them had never thought that the ruthless Master Ghostface Mask would actually be so young. Especially Jize. He was already the most outstanding genius of the younger generation. But when he saw Tang Tian, who was younger than him and was so much stronger than him, he could not believe his own eyes. Jize felt as though he was drenched from head to toe with ice water. The feeling that everything was under his control disappeared without a trace. What made him even more shocked was that he was actually unable to sense the Master's aura at all. He did not expect that the news of Dooku forming an army would actually cause the group of people to be so frightened. It was something that Tang Tian could not imagine, Since the start, he had always been surrounded by people who were not afraid of death. Even the weak lupus race had bravery in their bones. He had never been troubled by such a problem before. Everyone would always charge forward, none of them fearing death. Jize tried his best to suppress the fear and shock in his heart, but no matter how hard he tried, he was unable to sense the master's aura. The blurry light figure was like a lump of air. There was nothing there. Mortal enemies. Tang Tian did not hide anything. The disparity between the two parties was so huge that it made people feel depressed. When he stood out, the entire Sin domain moved for him. When Tang Tian heard the news, he was truly surprised. He was surprised by Du Ke's rallying power. The list of powerhouses had 20 martial artists. It was definitely a terrifying number. Tang Tian had a rough understanding of the martial artists on the list of powerhouses. There were only 50 people on the list of powerhouses, but even adding in the vicious list, the number of martial artists on the list of powerhouses did not exceed 100 in the entire Sin domain. What Tang Tian did not know was that the news of Du Ke forming the Sin domain's first army had caused a huge uproar in the entire Sin domain. Du Ke was the publicly acknowledged #1 man in the Sin domain, but he usually kept a low profile and rarely revealed himself. Tang Tian did not fear Du Ke, so he could not understand Fu Zhengji's thoughts. But when he looked at the other people, all of them had pale faces and were dazed. Jize, who had just obtained the new bewitching blade, was also dumbstruck. But can this godlike young lad be scared? Tang Tian snorted. What are you panicking for? Do you think an army is so easy to form? Tang Tian already felt that Du Ke was extremely pleasing to the eye, and without saying a word, no problem. Then I'll call you old Du. Du Ke did not mind. Geniuses were always weird, and he was not much better in the past, but instead felt that Tang Tian's straightforwardness was to his liking, and laughed. Du Ke is a few years older. I wonder if I can call you little brother? Tang Tian saw Jize's pale face and stiff body, and felt strange. Why are you not satisfied? Army, Sin domain's first army. Seeing Fu Zhengji's terrified look, Tang Tian was enraged. He opened his eyes wide and scolded. What are you panicking for? Look at yourself. Who is it? Jize was clear of his own strength, and losing to Master Ghostface Mask was nothing strange. But he had sensed the master approaching. At his level of strength, he was extremely sensitive to auras. Even if it was Du Ke, at such a close distance, he would not be able to sense him. That's good. Tang Tian heaved a sigh of relief, although the blade was not his, but if it was broken, it would be a loss of face. This godlike young lad, I can lose anything, but not my face. He said he is called Du Ke. Fu Zhengji's teeth were chattering. When he announced the formation of an army, close to 70% of the rich families in the 4 main cities immediately responded. Following that, the various geniuses and elites all surged into the Du residence. In less than 2 days, the news had spread to every corner of Sin domain, and countless of powerful martial artists responded. When the others heard that, they all turned their heads and looked at Jize in disbelief. They felt that it was inconceivable. You are still not satisfied? Just as Tang Tian was having a headache on how to raise the morale, Fu Zhengji stumbled in and stammered, Master, someone requests to see you. Is this still the decisive, emotionless, and unfathomable Master Ghostface Mask? He sized up the extremely ordinary-looking middle-aged man in front of him. This is Du Ke, the #1 man in Sin domain. Du Ke? Seeing the group of people being so disappointing, Tang Tian was immediately enraged. Look at your cowardly faces. All of you, train harder. Tang Tian never thought that Du Ke would actually come to find him. Ha ha ha! Tang Tian could not suppress the smile on his face. He waved his hands. Don't compare with me. Don't compare with me. This godlike young lad is always fiercer. Ha ha. Du Ke sighed. When I was at Mr. Tang's age, my strength was far from Mr. Tang's. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Fu Zhengji, who had rushed to Tang Tian, could not care about breathing, and immediately said, Master, Du Ke has also formed an army. Although Tang Tian was not considered intelligent, but he was not stupid and understood that. Seeing that the master was not moved, Fu Zhengji immediately became anxious. Master, Dooku's rallying power in Sin Domain is not ordinary. As long as he calls out, half of the experts will follow him. I heard that there are about 20 martial artists on the list of powerhouses. Even the most ordinary soldiers have to go through 3 rounds of selection, and every single one of them are experts that can hold their own. Master, what do we do? Then I truly have to thank old Do. The smile on Tang Tian's face disappeared, and he became serious. Suddenly, Fu Zhengji rushed over like a gust of wind, and when he was still 10 m away, he shouted in fear, Master! Master! Not good! Not good! Dooku had casually called out, and 20 of them came. His rallying power was truly terrifying. How can I make them not cower? Dooku is also forming an army? This news surprised Tang Tian, but it was just a slight surprise. This is too monstrous. Ha ha! No choice. It is easy to be young with talent. Tang Tian was pleased, and immediately revealed his true colors. Tang Tian gave a thumbs up. Old Do has good eyes. Seeing the group of people stumbling about as they went to train, but all of them were dejected, Tang Tian could not help but frown. Dooku's army had more than 20 people on the list of powerhouses, but they only had 2 people on their side. Master, they are definitely coming for us. When their army is formed, they will definitely come for us. Master, they're already calling themselves the Sin Domain's #1 army. Fu Zhengji said with a sullen face. That was the truly worrisome part for him. Ever since Tang Tian wanted to create the God Armor Army, Fu Zhengji was filled with longing and yearning for the title of Sin Domain's #1 army, which represented his limitless future. That was Dooku, the #1 man in Sin Domain. Chapter 807. Dooku had never seen such armor before. That meant that in his subconscious, Tang Tian was already able to pose a threat to him. If it was anyone else, they would definitely exclaim that it was impossible and suspect that it was a misconception. But Dooku did not. He understood and trusted himself, and his sensitivity to strength and danger had long become his instinct. At his level, his understanding of the world and himself had reached an extremely profound level. Thus, Dooku and Du Xianyu saw an unforgettable scene. Instinctively sensing danger, that was what Dooku was truly overwhelmed with shock. Tang Tian was busy with his God Armor Army. Regardless if it was Nie Chio or Zhongli Bai, they were unable to achieve lost surface resonance. Only Tang Tian was able to do it. The might of lost surface resonance caused Nie Chio and Zhongli Bai to be dumbstruck, but for it to be used in battle, it required more training. What Tang Tian did not know was that Old Du's standard was far from that. But, similarly, Zhongli Bai's East Immortal unit was also training fervently, which had been renamed as the Zhong unit, because his current unit was much larger than before. Dooku announced the formation of an army, and many of the bandit leaders went to seek shelter, leaving behind a group of bandits without a leader, all of which were absorbed by Zhongli Bai. What made Zhongli Bai unhappy was that the absorption process was completed with the help of the Null Division. Tang Tian found Dooku to be pleasing to the eye. He had seen so many people from the Sin Domain, but Dooku was the only brave warrior that had not lost his courage. Tang Tian did not like the Sin Domain because he hated the atmosphere there. It was filled with resignation. Without any bravery, it was like an ostrich burying its head in the sand, living a muddle-headed and cowardly life. He felt vexed, and the godlike young lad hated all vexed things. If Tang Tian knew that Dooku was able to see through the profoundness of the awakened God armor with just one look, he would definitely be shocked. Tang Tian's awakened God armor had been raised greatly, which stemmed from his enlightenment on the bewitching blade. No one had expected Dooku to form an alliance with Ghost Face Mask. Even Tang Tian did not expect it. But thinking about it, Tang Tian felt that it was natural. Dooku was shocked, but he became even more interested. He looked even more carefully. All of these law threads were not messy, but seemed to have been weaved. Dooku had attacked the Sindor before, but returned in failure. The honorable Martial Continent's defense in the Sindor was definitely not ordinary. It was not a bone-chilling coldness, but a kind of indifference that seemed to understand everything. It was as if a god was looking down on the crowd from the sky, without the slightest bit of emotion. After Dooku announced his alliance with Ghost Face Mask, he used lightning-fast methods to quickly control the other families in the four main cities. The four main cities had intended to keep Duke's family in check, but in front of Duke, they did not have the slightest power to retaliate. He was very clear that since he instinctively felt danger, then this danger definitely existed. Fortunately, Tang Tian didn't have to worry about morale. Ever since he had formed an alliance with Duke, his subordinates were all fired up. This made Tang Tian quite unhappy. This was old Duke's prestige. Humph, you bunch of small fries. When you reach the sanctuary, you will know how powerful this godlike young man is. This point could be seen from the synchronization rate, which had increased greatly. Old Du, who had disappeared for a few days, had once again appeared in Tang Tian's training camp, and behind him was a lady that was as cold as an ice mountain. Ever since he stepped into the law domain, no one was his opponent. The sense of danger was extremely foreign to him, and he could not remember how long it had been since he last had such a feeling. He even knew that the sense of danger was not because of Tang Tian's hostility towards him, but originated from his instinctive reaction to Tang Tian's glance. Tang Tian, who always sought revenge for the smallest grievance, quietly increased the difficulty of training, causing the God Armor Army to be thrown into chaos. No one wanted to fall at the final barrier. Because of the problem with the attributes of laws, there were many laws that conflicted with each other and were unable to fuse. At the start, this made Tang Tian feel suffocated, but after that, Tang Tian realized that it might not be a bad thing. Of course, old Du was able to see that this godlike young man was not ordinary. His eyesight was extremely good. It also showed that old Du was an old man with a young heart, a middle-aged man with a young heart. All of them were experienced in battles and had outstanding talent, and with just a little guidance, they would quickly comprehend the essentials. In a short period of time, the first army that she commanded had taken shape. But in the training that followed, Tang Tian realized that it was impossible to achieve. An indescribable sense of danger enveloped Du Ke's entire body without any warning, causing Du Ke's expression to change. A portion of the law threads that were attached to his body were being weaved by Tang Tian, imitating the bewitching blade blood laws. Tang Tian did not pay much attention to the content. He had a bunch of things to do. The Null Division, Zhong Li Bai and the rest had also returned to Sharp Wind City, but they were not immersed in the joy of reuniting, but were immersed in their crazy training. After going through the trials and tribulations, everyone deeply understood that strength was the most important thing. Is the person in front of me wrapped in law threads with an indifferent expression, as though he has become one with the world, truly Tang Tian? How can he gather so many law threads on his body? Why is Tang Tian's aura so weird? Duke had seen many experts, and all of them had their own aura, but the aura that Tang Tian was releasing was something that Duke had never seen before. The scale of the Zhong division surpassed the Null division by a lot. Zhong Li Bai picked and chose, and only had 10,000 men left, but their fighting capabilities were far from the Null division. Zhong Li Bai could not tolerate his own subordinates being cannon fodder, especially when he thought about how he owed Niet Xiu a favor. He felt as though he had swallowed a fly. But since he owed Niet Xiu, Zhong Li Bai could only vent his anger and sullenness on the army. The Zhong family's devil's special training began in a fiery manner. The increase in synchronization made Tang Tian satisfied, but the problems that were revealed during the training made Tang Tian feel that it was troublesome. In his previous thoughts, he was able to gather the power of 200 lost surfaces and merge them into one, which was an attack that was impossible to defend against. Du Xian sized up the bustling training camp curiously. It was extremely unfamiliar to her. Ever since her big brother had planned to build an army, she had agreed to it and had been focused on it. She had even specially run to the vicinity of Galloping Horse City to observe the tacit understanding between the Null Division and the bandits. Allying with Du meant that he did not need to waste time fighting the Sin Domain. Now, there was only one last obstacle, and that was how to rush out of the death path, how to break through the sin door. Only those who were willing to stay in the sin domain would think that Tang Tian and the rest were enemies. Dooku had barged through the sin door and stepped onto the peak. How could he lack courage? But everything in front of her seemed to be extremely different from what she had comprehended. The current awakened god armor on Tang Tian's body was no longer as messy as before, but had the outline of an armor. But the outer layers still had a large number of law threads floating. Tang Tian's understanding of laws was still shallow, and all of the law threads were varied, with many of them mutually reinforcing and restraining each other, and sorting out a portion of them already took up a lot of effort from Tang Tian. Just thinking about it made him excited. The originally vast amount of laws were able to fuse and transform, and that was an even more vast world. Zhong Li Bai, who had a fiery temper, directly arranged for the camp beside the Null Division, and the two armies started to compete. The large number of Null Division members that had returned needed to quickly familiarize themselves with the brand new fighting methods. Even Sima Xiao had to lower his status and immerse himself in training like any ordinary member. Not only was Du Xianyu suspicious, even Du Ku, who was by the side, was shocked. In terms of intelligence, Du Xianyu was unparalleled in the Du family, and that was the reason why Du Ku had entrusted the heavy responsibility of building an army to her. She did not disappoint her brother, and very quickly, she was tossing and turning. But she was not arrogant. She knew that the cards in her hands were much better than the Null Division, and the elites of the Sin domain were all under her. That is Tang Tian. Old Dooku is the #1 in the Sin domain, so he has some standards. Even Ji Zhe and Fu Zhengji were currently filled with interest towards this point. Everyone excitedly tried out different combinations to see what kind of attacks they could achieve. It was a brand new world, and all of them only trained in one type of law, but they had never thought that the power of laws could actually be fused. In terms of might, it was truly not as terrifying as they had expected, but the diversity of their attacks was extremely rich. When different laws were fused together, they could give rise to different transformations, and the attributes of their attacks were ever-changing. To the enemies, it was definitely a nightmare, and it meant that their attacks were even more difficult to predict. Dooku's eyes congealed. His heart was indescribably shaken. The last time he met Tang Tian, he only felt that Tang Tian was a straightforward person and was a good person. In truth, he did not hold much hope for Tang Tian's strength. To him, he could only rely on himself and the Sin Domain army. The reason why he had formed an alliance with Tang Tian was because he hoped to borrow the strength of the Null Division. When Dooku thought of that, he was shocked by his own description. Gods? Damn it. What am I thinking? That's too funny. As the teachers of the Sin Domain army, Dooku acknowledged the Null Division's fighting capabilities. And as he had said, he did not have any conflict of interest with Tang Tian. The last time they met, although he did not place Tang Tian's strength in his eyes, but he did not neglect him. Of course, his efforts were not wasted, although he had only combed through a portion of it, but the awakened god armors might had greatly increased. For a person who has not stepped into the law domain to be able to pose a threat to me, the answer must definitely be the armor on Tang Tian's body. Dooku's understanding of laws was something no one in the Sin domain could compare to. With one look, he could tell that the armor on Tang Tian's body was made up of countless of law threads. All of these law threads were strange, but they did not have any relationship with each other, as though they were hodgepodge. And to Dooku, there were even some law threads that looked opposite. As though sensing Dooku's attention, Tang Tian, who was in the sky, glanced at Dooku. Chapter 808. Ji Zhe's bewitching blade's expanded blood screen revealed many holes, and transformed into a blood net. The faint green light rain was like fine sprouts that were blown by the wind. The blood net had many unremarkable green dots. They were sprouts, products of life laws. Upon touching the enemy's body, they would absorb the enemy's life force and continue to grow and strengthen. The degree of complexity was enough to make one's hair stand on end. Tang Tian's voice did not have any undulations, as though he was a lifeless machine. Everything that was happening in front of him toppled everything he knew. The terracotta soldiers were so frightened that they were about to drop rocks. Is he even human? Is he? What the hell is this? The members that trained in spatial laws were long prepared. The formation released layers of spatial undulations, and at the tip of every ice storm spear, there was an additional flickering black dot, the ripples that were hard to see with the naked eye. With the black dot as the center, they spread out. To be struck by such a highly compressed lightning ball without any preparation, it was definitely a heavy blow. Attack. They were spatial blades formed from spatial laws and were used as spear tips. Inside the formation, it was another scene. The lightning converged and transformed into many lightning balls. Suddenly, a black figure swam out from the shadows of the formation and swallowed the lightning balls, disappearing in the blink of an eye. The 213 rounds of training were not in vain. Although the members were in a state of fatigue, but their performance was much better than before. They all relaxed their bodies, calmed their breathing, and focused. All of their figures were like bows that were slowly being pulled back. This is 10 members attacking at the same time. Master, you must be joking. That's right. That must be it. Of course, that was on the premise that his idea could be realized. Beside him, Du Xinyu's face was as white as paper. Her legs went soft, and she actually fell to the ground. Fu Zhengji quivered and removed all the distracting thoughts from his mind. Jize, who was like a statue, seemed to have come alive. His tensed-up body relaxed. He opened his eyes and exhaled, his face suffusing a tinge of blood. The rest became alert. Their faces had traces of fatigue, but all of them still opened their eyes wide, allowing themselves to focus even more. That was the only thought in Du Ku's mind. Round 213, number 33, get ready. At this moment, Tang Tian was abnormally sensitive to the changes in his surroundings. He could clearly feel this seemingly formless killing intent, and he could also clearly see the state of each member. He couldn't believe his eyes. Even a spear formed by a domain realm master couldn't give him such a shock. What did he just see? Fusion. The fusion of the laws. Tang Tian's expression did not change, but he was extremely focused. He was the core of the entire army, and he controlled the rhythm of the army's attacks. Every member's law surface had to be connected to him to complete the resonance of the law surface. If it was in pairs, it meant that he had to deal with 100 sets of resonances at the same time. Fu Zhengji moved. The chief green swords were unsheathed, and the corrosive poison mist instantly enveloped the area in front of him. Then, the team members beside him also moved. Looking up from below, it looked like an invisible whip was swinging, both ends of the whip swinging in the same direction. Pay attention to the sequence of attacks. However, only he had the Awakened God armor. Following that, the two ends of the invisible whip lit up with light aura at the same time. A large number of ice crystals scattered down, and countless of wind blade storms converged together. The ice and wind laws had completely fused into a white ice storm. The blood-devouring vine net and the sprout, as long as they touched it, other than being sucked dry, they would be sucked dry. Over 500 rounds of training. How many combinations had they tried? Even they themselves did not know. Their daily training schedule was packed, causing everyone to feel dizzy. The light wheel that was over 10 m in diameter was not as intense. The flame-like teeth of the wheel had dark gold patterns. It was truly a nightmare training, but everyone was completely numb to it. No matter how arrogant or untamed they were, they could not produce any thoughts of grumbling. It was not that they did not dare, it was that they did not have the strength. Day and night, Master Ghostface Mask, oh no, now it was Master Tang Tian, he never knew exhaustion, and brought them out to try things out. Everyone was now in awe of Master Tang Tian. Look, Master is still as vigorous as ever, so calm and collected, as though the daily training was just a stroll. Doesn't Master feel tired at all? Too sinister and too vicious. The compressed lightning balls were still fine. Such an attack could be easily blocked if one was prepared. But using the cover of the night in the chaotic battlefield, it immediately became a weapon for sneak attacks. Another dazzling multicolored light aura flickered. The 13 ice storm pikes were wrapped with flames, poison, death, aura, etc. His mind subconsciously thought of the pikes landing on the enemy's body. There was no defense that could block the terrifying pikes. Even if it was him, if he were to take on the pikes head-on, his own law domain might crumble. Furthermore, the spatial undulations of the poison mist had weakened the enemy a step earlier. But a pity they did not have the strength. And when Tang Tian took out a thick tactical manual and threw it to them, for all of them to memorize it, the 200 of them immediately turned into terracotta soldiers. At that moment, dazzling light wheels flew out from the formation. Like many suns rising, all of the light wheels flew into the sky, and like magnets, they started to fuse together, finally forming a gigantic light wheel. Light wheel was the most ordinary attack of light laws, but when more than 10 light wheels fused into one, it became extremely terrifying. Tang Tian's gaze swept across everyone. He was extremely dissatisfied. They had all undergone 213 rounds of training, but all of them were still inexperienced. They were filled with loopholes and made all sorts of mistakes. But this did not affect his emotions at all. Even he himself had to admit that the tactics were truly complicated. Fu Zhengji felt his lungs burning. His throat was burning with smoke. He glanced at Ji Zhe from the corner of his eyes. Ji Zhe's face was also covered in perspiration. The blood-red light flowed on his body. He stood there unmoving like a statue. The cold command pierced through the air. They were trying their best to recall the contents of Tactic 33. Killing intent quietly pervaded out. The terracotta soldiers started to frantically memorize the 120-page tactical manual. Compared to the tactical manual, facing Master, Dooku was not as scary. Master, we can help you kill Dooku, let us go. Fu Zhengji could not help but feel envious. It's good to be young. Of course, he was even more envious of Ji Zhe's bewitching blade. The new bewitching blade was not only able to affect the enemy's blood flow, it could also be used on his own body, regulating the blood flow in his body, speeding up recovery, and relieving fatigue. The fighting style of the Awakened Army was something that other armies were unable to imitate, unless they had someone like Tang Tian who was able to connect everyone's lost surface. Just surrender. Dooku was shocked by the thought that popped up in his mind. Wait a minute. At the start, everyone was still filled with interest. The combination of laws was something new to them. Everyone started to discuss what kind of combination would be able to produce what effect. The God Armor Army in the sky suddenly sank into a strange silence. The surrounding air seemed to have frozen. Before the hailstorm had even unfurled, the 13 members who trained in water blades made their moves at the same time. A large amount of water vapor enveloped the white hailstorm that had yet to disperse. Upon contact with the hailstorm, the water vapor quickly froze, but the flexible yet fast water blades still managed to split the hailstorm into 13 parts. 5 members who trained in the vortex flow law made their moves at the same time. The 13 pieces of hailstorm that were split apart were quickly compressed, extended, and rotated. The 13 long hailstorm spears spun rapidly in the air, releasing a whistling sound that caused people's hearts to tremble. He suppressed the shock in his heart. His gaze that was filled with fear swept across Tang Tian's formation. Tang Tian was clear of this point. He who was in the state of the God armor was extremely agile. After all, he was not a true military general and did not have any attainments in tactics, but his understanding of laws allowed him to have the ability to combine the fighting strength of the group. No one discussed about the law combinations anymore. If they still had the strength, they would definitely scold out loud. Who the hell discovered that laws could be combined? Dooku's gaze trembled again. 67 types of tactics, a total of 328 combinations, from the simplest 2-man combination to the most complicated 12-man combination. Just looking at it caused them to feel dazzled and their scalps to go numb. Furthermore, all these tactics contained completely different combinations. The sequence of attacks, the coordination methods were all completely different. That was enough. Since they did not know how to scheme, then they would use their strength to speak. As long as he could do that, the 200-man army would be able to unleash an astonishing might. enough to destroy the enemies that stood in front of them. Duca was unable to shift his gaze away from the ice windpikes. If it was said that Tang Tian's previous glance made him feel an instinctive sense of danger, then when the 13 ice windpikes were formed, the fear and trepidation made him feel an intense urge to make a move. The terracotta soldiers who had their mouths wide open looked at the master, only to see an expressionless face. His gaze seemed to have caught on to something, and when he swept his gaze across the light wheel, his pupils suddenly dilated. Duca's gaze was no longer just trembling. Even his lips were trembling. A sword light blossomed out from behind the light wheel without any warning. But the master actually remembered it. Run! The night laws transformed into a dense curtain of night, enveloping the lightning balls, not revealing a trace of their aura. After swallowing one lightning ball after another, the lightning balls were compressed in its body, and upon activation, its might was unimaginable. The curtain of night that enveloped the lightning balls was like a shark swimming in the deep sea, ready to deal a fatal blow to its enemy at any time. They felt that it was inconceivable. Laws can actually be combined. Oh my God! If not for him activating the Awakened God armor, he would definitely not be able to complete the astonishing tactics manual, and even memorizing it would be extremely difficult. Under the state of the Awakened God armor, the extremely complicated combinations to him did not pose any difficulty at all. But after 500 rounds of probing, messing up again and combining again, everyone felt dizzy and exhausted. In the end, upon hearing the order, they reacted instinctively. Chapter 809. Just like how there were no two identical leaves in the world similarly did not have two identical law surfaces. The laws trained and were different, talent was different, training time was different, the depth of comprehension was different, etc. In the end, every person's law surface was completely different. How did Tang Tian do it? Just as she was feeling puzzled, Tang Tian continued. But this is more in line with the state of battle. If they were able to complete the strategy under extreme conditions, then they would definitely be able to do it at other times. Moreover, it was easier to break through the limit. With so many benefits, you only need to be a little tired. She had once imagined herself as the enemy of this army. What would she do if the army she led faced this small army? 10 seconds later, her entire body trembled uncontrollably. She suddenly realized that no matter what method she used, she was definitely unable to contend against the small army. Du Xianyu raised her head. If we return to the sacred Saint Galaxy, where should we go? Du Xianyu was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, we will also use the extreme training method. The strength displayed by this army of 200 men had far exceeded the limits of her imagination. This was an unprecedented combination of laws, filled with unparalleled imagination. In the hundreds of years of Sin Domain, no one had ever thought that laws could actually be combined. Du Xianyu said softly, firstly, Tang Tian has a common enemy with us. Secondly, we have been away from the sacred region for too long. Not only do we not have any foundation in the sacred region, but we also don't know anything about the sacred region. If one were to travel alone, one would probably run into walls everywhere. Furthermore, the Sin Domain is made up of laws, while the sacred Saint Galaxy is made up of energy. What kind of effect it will have on us, and how strong our fighting strength will be, is hard to predict. Du Xianyu was in a daze. She had not recovered from the shock just now. Why would Tang Tian care about the Sin Domain? Duca said, seems like we'll definitely be able to enter the Sin Gate this time. Duca purposely tried to ease the atmosphere. A young man who could be so ruthless to himself, even in the Sin Domain, was rarely seen. Fu Zhengji and the rest's faces all turned green. The solemn and stirring look on their faces turned into grief and indignation. Master, isn't this just a little tiring? It wasn't that she didn't know that it was easy to break through under extreme conditions, but knowing was one thing, and being able to do it was another. Not only did he need to be ruthless to the soldiers, but he also needed to be ruthless to himself. Their attacks were powerful and lethal. They were layered and ever-changing, making it impossible to guard against them. Du Xianyu remained silent. Du Xianyu hesitated for a while, then said, "Follow Tang Tian." She was deeply shocked. Sure enough, after a while, Tang Tian said to Duke, "I'll talk to you next time. I have to train first." What kind of strategy is this? Why is it different from the Null Division? 200 people. Duke knew that his sister was really upset this time and couldn't help but smile bitterly. No one could withstand such a powerful force. No one. Even if it was him, Dooku, the #1 man in Sin Domain, in the face of such power, he would be instantly annihilated. If there were only 1 or 2 people, Duke would not be so surprised. How many people were there? He looked at the young face in front of him and was speechless for a moment. "I can't." Dooku shook his head. He knew that his sister had suffered a huge blow today, but he still spoke calmly. Tang Tian was able to achieve it because he had the Awakened God armor. His Awakened God armor is made up of his self-created God Fist, Demon 6 Seals, and the unique critical state. The only thing I can achieve is the critical state. "Do Xin?" you suddenly asked. "Can we learn the lost surface resonance?" Duke nodded his head. He did not interrupt his sister. The 2 points pointed to the crux of the matter. That was what Dooku found inconceivable. Sob. I knew it would be like that. But thinking about Tang Tian's age and his achievements at such a young age, Dooku felt a rare trace of jealousy. Even though he was already the #1 man in Sin Domain, but in front of Tang Tian, he did not feel proud at all. In terms of understanding of laws, no one in the entire Sin Domain could compare to Dooku. Tang Tian had only mentioned it once, and he roughly knew what was going on. He could understand the lost surface resonance, and even the reason why the lost surface resonance could produce such a powerful force. He only needed to ponder for a moment to understand it. But he also knew that to achieve the lost surface resonance, it required extremely harsh conditions. Dooku's mind was roused, and he said, "I will go and speak to Tang Tian now. That will require time, a very long time." "Do Xin?" You hit the nail on the head. Can brother hold on until then? I am afraid that the Honorable Martial Continent will not let brother do as you wish. Her expression was blank. Her ears were buzzing. She was completely unable to hear what the other party was saying and could only watch the comical scene unfold. Lost surface resonance. Do Xin? You sighed lightly. Thirdly, if we seek our own land, we will be weak and need the support of the Sin Domain to survive, but I believe that brother knows the current atmosphere of the Sin Domain. There are not many people like brother who have the ambition to walk out of the Sin Domain. Without anyone, if our hearts are not united, how can we accomplish anything? What she did not expect was for Tang Tian to nod his head. I do. But no one dared to go over. They were clear of their master's abnormal recovery speed. After continuous training, they had long grasped Tang Tian's habits, and if they did not seize the time to recover, they would not have the strength for the next round of training. So they just had to wait. Dooku was startled. He had never thought of that question before. He suddenly understood the meaning behind his sister's words. The God Armor Army was so strong, and the possibility of them returning to the Sacred Saint Galaxy was not small. But after returning to the Sacred Saint Galaxy, where should they go? Dooku's emotions were complicated. Choosing to form an alliance with Tang Tian, and from the looks of it, it was the correct decision. The God Armor Army's powerful fighting ability made him confident in barging into the Sin Door. Just a little bit tired? Dooku was silent after a moment of hesitation. In time, they might awaken. After a short gasp, Tang Tian had recovered slightly and immediately trembled with a pleased look on his face. How did you do it? That is a long story. That was what made her suffer the most, and there was nothing that made her as proud and arrogant as herself admitted. He could not help but laugh bitterly. It was truly infuriating to compare oneself to others. And to compare goods, you have to throw them away. I'm truly a frog in a well. The #1 man of the Sin Domain is only so. Thinking about that, he became even more eager to rush out of the Sin Domain. It was a vast world with even more heroes. She stood there in a daze, like a puppet. This also made her feel proud. Everyone who was lying on the ground struggled to stand up with tragic looks on their faces. In terms of understanding laws, she was still lacking compared to her brother. But for Dooku to hand over the task of building an army to her, she naturally had her own unique abilities. The laws that she trained in were similar to Nye Chio's yin-yang formation, and with her calm and decisive personality, she was undoubtedly the most suitable candidate. How can I do it? Tang Tian did not hide anything. Seeing Du Ke's anxious expression, he could not help but feel pleased. If it was any other time, he would definitely flaunt it. But he was too tired, he did not have any strength, and could only give a simple explanation. Suddenly, Du Xnu spoke out coldly. Their physical strength has not fully recovered, and they are already in a rush to train. Won't that affect the results of their training? Du Ke replied seriously. Sister, please advise us. But the scene in front of her made her feel that it was comical. But they had to admit that the extreme training method was extremely effective, and all of their strengths had different degrees of growth. It had to be known, for someone of Fu Zhangji's age, it was reasonable to say that he had already missed the golden age of growth, but he still had a huge improvement. And for a young man like Jize, his growth was even more obvious. Law surface resonance. Du Ke's eyes were wide open, and he exclaimed, How is that possible? Du Xin was startled. When Tang Tian flew down from the sky, Du Ke rushed forward anxiously. With 200 people's law surface resonance, how terrifying would the undulations formed when they converge? But all of his pride, upon witnessing the training, had been completely shattered. Du Xinu laughed. It doesn't matter if Tang Tian is here or not, as long as brother is concerned. So, brother, you need to live on. The longer you live, the more you do not forget your original intentions, and only then can you slowly change the sacred Saint Galaxy. Both parties were on completely different levels. With that, he turned and shouted, Get up! All of you get up! Prepare to begin! Tang Tian, who had removed the Awakened God armor, was slightly pale. To activate the Awakened God armor, one had to reach a critical point, and the law surface resonance brought a huge burden to Tang Tian. Although the majority of the burden was absorbed by the Awakened God armor, but as the controller, Tang Tian had to bear the burden as well. Du Ke's understanding of laws was unparalleled, and he was able to see much more than ordinary people. In this 200-man small army, Tang Tian was the true core, and he was the one who connected the 200 lost surfaces. For 2 lost surfaces to be in resonance, what sort of tacit understanding was required? Du Ke was surprised. Although he had formed an alliance with Tang Tian, but he had never thought of following Tang Tian. But he knew his sister's personality and knew that she would not speak carelessly. Thus he said, Sister, please speak in detail. Following that, Tang Tian used an extremely exaggerated tone to describe his enlightenment on the Awakened God armor and the process of discovering the law surface resonance, with the emphasis on highlighting the godlike young lad's wisdom and martial prowess. Haha, old Du is a country bumpkin who has never seen the world. It scared him to death. Just thinking about it makes me excited. This is too ferocious. Even the Sindor is unable to withstand such a terrifying attack. She did not disappoint her big brother's trust. She organized the army in an orderly manner, and based on the Null Division's tactics, she quickly created their own tactics. Even when Du Ke saw it, he was full of praises. Fu Zhengji and the rest's last bit of strength was squeezed out. Everyone laid on the ground in disarray, all of them making the best use of their time to recover their strength. Even though they heard the master blabbering on, causing Master Du Ke to be stunned, it made them secretly happy. This is Master Du Ke, the #1 man in Sin Domain. To be able to shock him, if word of it spreads, it would scare everyone to death. Du Ke sized up Tang Tian once again. He felt that he had to re-evaluate the exaggerated young lad. With just a slight calculation, Du Ke knew that its might was enough to flatten a few cities. Amongst the group of people who were sitting on the ground, a young lad stood there, facing his big brother. He danced around with exaggerated expressions, while his big brother's expression was sluggish, weird, and shocked. Chapter 8:10. As for the warships, they were long thrown out of his mind. What warships? How could they compare to the assault of a mechanical spirit weapon? In such a short period of time, He has already grown to such a stage. I remember. Nietschio's breathing became stifled. He was also unable to forget the monstrous aura. With that thought, Sima Xiao felt the tightness in his chest lessen. But upon thinking about the powerful Tang Tian, if they were to return to Heaven's Road, who would be able to contend with him? Deep in his eyes, a gloomy look flashed past. They did not even know what the current honorable Marshall continent was like. Good idea. Nietschio was also moved by the suggestion. Heaven's Road's military generals use control auras to control the battle. Can we find a breakthrough from that? The ugly, monstrous mechanical spirit weapons seemed to be made for Zhong Li Bai. He could imagine that with such a terrifying killing machine, the Zhong unit's offense would be terrifying beyond compare. But Tang Tian, who was in the eye of the storm, was extremely calm. He was patiently training and testing, waiting for the battle to come. His situation was much better than the rest, but he was not satisfied with it and immersed himself in training. In theory, we can, but the requirement for the leader is very high, and we are currently unable to meet such a requirement. Upon thinking about the ugly and sinister monstrous beast in the training grounds, he could not help but feel his blood boil. Nietschio did not let it get to his head, and maintained his rationality. I want to first see if the warships are suitable for the Null Division. Zhong Li Bai thought for a moment, and the light in his eyes became even more intense. That's right. Do you still remember that ugly mechanical spirit weapon? It was the mechanical spirit weapon we saw on the first day we arrived at Three Spirits City. If we are equipped with those mechanical spirit weapons, who can stop us? When Zhong Li Bai said that, his voice trembled involuntarily. He was completely ignited by the sudden thought. The stronger Tang Tian was, the brighter their future would be. The military generals of Heaven's Road had long developed into a strict system, with a long history and various sections. Zhong Li Bai's face immediately became as black as the bottom of a pot. The majority of Zhong unit members were bandits in the past, and definitely did not insult the word motley crew. The bandits did not have any tactics to speak of, although Zhong Li Bai had grasped this aspect of training, but to reach the Null Division's current standard, they still had a long way to go. No one would be happy to watch their opponent, who was vying for supremacy, leave them further and further behind. Sometimes he even felt a sense of helplessness in his heart. The heavy demonic execution was extremely effective in tempering one's body. Moreover, there was a large amount of golden steel gravel to replenish one's life essence. Thinking about the torrent of bronze monsters, they were unstoppable. The fighting intent in Zhong Li Bai's body surged, and he felt that it was unnecessary to sit for a while longer. He stood up abruptly. I'm going to supervise their training. One of the important points of building a mechanical army was that the soldiers needed to have extremely high tactical attainments. In this aspect, the Ursa Major Constellation soldiers had an illustrious reputation. Different from Sima Zhao's complicated emotions, the rest of them were shocked, but more of them were happy. Tang Tian happily agreed to Dooku's request to join them. He did not think much about it, and did not feel that there was anything wrong with it. On the contrary, it caused Fu Zhengji and Ji Zhe to be dumbstruck. Dooku and Tang Tian's alliance had already caused their eyeballs to drop to the ground, but for Dooku to join Tang Tian's camp, this. The rise of Ursa Major Constellation was inseparable from the power of mechanical armies. Currently, mechanical armies were no longer rare in Heaven's Road, and even if the various families did not have them, they would definitely research on them. Zhong Li Bai's beard was unkempt, but his face was flushed red with excitement, his eyes revealing a bright light. The God Armor Army is a typical high and small army. Just like the Silver Frost Mounts in the past, they are hard to replicate. I feel that we do not need to be affected by this. We need to look at the big picture. Where will our future main battlefield be? Sacred Saint Galaxy and Heaven's Road. That place plays with energy. Whether or not laws will not be acclimatized, we do not know, but we need to think of a way. I feel that we can use warships. That is the most suitable strategy for us. Unless we find another feasible method. From the looks of it, Master's method does not have the possibility to spread. Dooku simply gathered all of them together and told them about Du Xianyu's words, causing them to become speechless. Although they were clamoring, but upon thinking about returning to the completely unfamiliar sacred Saint Galaxy, they did not feel confident at all. In terms of style, Zhong Li Bai was the classic example of a Leo constellation military general. He was dauntless, decisive, and had a powerful impact, like a heavy and powerful hammer. Nie Xiao and Zhong Li Bai received a huge impact. It had toppled everything they had learned, and directly prompted the two of them to join hands. The last time the two of them joined hands was when they were training in the Null Division. Their bodies were easy to train, with the heavy, demonic execution and golden steel gravel. Adding that the Sin Domain people's bodies were naturally tyrannical, it was not a problem. Nie Xiao laughed. This can only be confirmed after we reach the Sacred Saint Galaxy and research it. The Sin Domain people all had complicated emotions, fear, hesitation, loss, anticipation all mixed together, but everyone knew that regardless of whether they succeeded or not, the Sin Domain would change. To Sima Shao, the experience in the Sin Domain was a nightmare. His strength had dropped to zero. He had lost his connection with the Scorpio, Magatama, and the Scorpio King who was famous in Heaven's Road had actually fallen to such a state. But he was after all someone who had started from scratch and stepped onto the position of an ambitious and ruthless overlord. His perseverance was not normal. His quick reflexes and outstanding mind allowed him to quickly gain considerable freedom. Damn it! He rushed out of Nie Xiao's room with killing intent. The God Armor Army had opened up a brand new fighting style and was a brand new and groundbreaking army. The God Armor Army's theory is based on lost surface resonance. Do we have any leeway to learn from it? Nie Xiao's suggestions were all seemingly minute details, but when all of them were gathered together, Du Xianyu realized that the fighting strength of the army had increased greatly. Mechanical spirit weapons are also a good supplement, Nie Xiao said. But what made everyone truly convinced was Nie Xiao's visit to Du Xianyu's army, and a large number of practical and targeted suggestions. Once an expert makes a move, you will know whether or not it is true. Initially, Du Xianyu and the other list of powerhouses martial artists who thought that they had already understood how armies worked. Only then did they realize that they were still too inexperienced compared to them. Tang Tian's God Armor Army not only gave Dooku, Du Xianyu, and Sima Shao immense pressure, it also gave Nie Xiao and Zhong Li Bai immense pressure. My meticulous control is the real anomaly. In terms of the dazzling brilliance, the Sin Domain citizens might be shocked, but to the people from Heaven's Road, it was nothing. In Heaven's Road, the brilliance of martial techniques were even more exquisite and dazzling. But in their eyes, the brilliance that was not considered dazzling released undulations that caused everyone's scalps to tense up. Not only did they not understand, even the others did not understand. Regardless of influence or strength, to the people of Sin Domain, Tang Tian and Dooku were on completely different levels. But the development of the situation was out of their expectations. Amaury's expression congealed as he looked at the group of small black dots in the distance. He muttered, the undulations that came out from there caused people's hearts to palpitate. No one bothered about him, as the rest were engrossed. It was not their first time witnessing the God Armor Army's training, but every time they watched it, they would have a more direct experience. Tang Tian's men were naturally overjoyed, but Dooku's subordinates all objected. Warships are more suitable for you. Zhong Li Bai nodded his head. Warships were bigger and had more weapons installed, with more emphasis on coordination. To Nie Xiao, who had an outstanding view of the big picture and was a military general with meticulous control, it was the most suitable. Zhong Li Bai, who was stirred up by his own thoughts, scoffed. Since we have a rough direction, we need to adjust our training. Training in laws requires too much time, and we do not have time for them to slowly train. We are about to barge into the Sin Door. Master will definitely not stop for long, and we need to return to the Sacred Saint Galaxy. Regardless if it is warships or small beasts, we need to test our bodies. The focus of our training should be on the heavy, demonic execution. It was like a person who had been locked up in a room for too long. suddenly knowing that he had to walk out. The uneasiness and fear in his heart was extremely normal. But compared to that fellow, if it is not a lost surface, what about law threads? Can we complete the resonance? It should be possible, but its might is too small and has no practical value. Yes, your team still needs some tactics training. Nietzsche reminded him kindly. Honorable Martial Alliance. That was the nickname that the Honorable Martial Alliance gave to Tang Tian in the past because they looked down on Tang Tian. But as time passed, the Honorable Martial Alliance still had the grindstone, but the sword had been ground away, so when the Honorable Martial Alliance faced the nickname again, they would definitely feel even more complicated than him. What kind of stupid tactic is Crazy Tang using? Sima Zhao's gaze never left Tang Tian, his heart filled with shock and fear. He could only watch as the other party single-handedly changed the situation, while he himself was unable to do anything. Initially, he was happy with his own improvement, but after seeing Tang Tian's improvement, he suddenly understood the feelings of the Honorable Martial Alliance. The news of barging into the Sin Door and returning to the Sacred Saint Galaxy was no longer news. It had long spread throughout the entire Sin domain and became the hottest topic. I must definitely train all of these bastards until they wish they were dead. The two of them had already discussed for 2 days, with intense arguments occurring more frequently. The 2 days of discussion had caused the two of them to be extremely exhausted, but some of the unclear areas had gradually become clear. Sima Zhao's heart was filled with complicated emotions. Although he was currently in the same boat as Tang Tian, but his identity was even more sensitive, and he was the only one who was not in Tang Tian's faction. In the short term, they were allies, but in the long term, they were competitors. As for barging into the Sin Door, he could not imagine who could stop the Master's God Armor Army. If the other party could truly stop the Master's God Armor Army, then even the Null Division and Zhong Division combined would not be their match. Chapter 8:11. No wonder we want to attack the Shan continent. With so much money, who can resist? And then, someone asked impatiently, by an army? For the past few hundred years, the Honorable Martial Continent had been undefeatable. They had swallowed the various continents of the Western region and had become the strongest overlord. The continuous accumulation of victories gave the people of the Honorable Martial Continent a sense of self-confidence. They firmly believed that the Honorable Martial Continent was undefeatable, and they had a fanaticism towards war that other people did not have. Iron Spear Cliff was the head of the 3 great generals under Go Chung Wan Dao and was extremely brave. Everyone was also part of the mixed army, and they knew that the army in the country had a strict hierarchy, and the difference in strength was huge. Cliff's army was a few levels higher than them, and Cliff's direct army was the elite of the elites. Only the direct army of the 5 great generals was stronger than them. There must be a mistake in the information. A young genius like General Chiu only appears once every few hundred years. When Kong took the wine pot and drank a mouthful without hesitation. Perhaps in terms of individual strength, some might be able to surpass the 5 of them. However, when it came to commanding battles, especially large-scale battles, the other generals were on a completely different level compared to the 5 Radiant Tigers. Yeah, how could there be such an attack? When Kong pretended to be mysterious, seeing that he had whetted everyone's appetite, he said, "One of them is called Xie Yuan. Speaking of this Xie Yuan, he does have some background. He is Bai Yu's classmate." Impossible. Everyone was in an uproar again. The large-scale siege boats were the ultimate war beasts, although they had many flaws, but they were powerful enough to cause people to despair, allowing them to look down on the entire battlefield. According to the drill manual, drinking while on duty was a heavy punishment. But this was the Sin Gate. What drill did the Sin Gate have? It had to be said that when Kang's eloquence was superb, everyone's attention was drawn to him. Everyone's mouths were wide open. Their faces were filled with disbelief. They had never heard of armies being able to be bought before. In the Sin Gate, the Southern Punitive Expedition was the hottest topic. When Kong saw everyone's expression, he was secretly pleased. In fact, when he first heard about this matter, he was not much better than them. He coughed lightly. At the start, we did not care about it. Swift Army? Never heard of it. General Go Chang Wendao was a ferocious man. He was like a peerless treasured blade, with an irresistible force. The Southern Alliance defensive line was in disarray and was about to crumble. At that time, he was preparing to pursue them on all fronts, but he discovered that one of the positions was still guarded. Unfortunately, the location of that place was ingenious. If he wanted to pursue an attack, he would have to first pull out this nail. Lord Cliff, who was also known as the Iron Spear, happened to be here. Sir Cliff then sent his 3rd Division to pull out this nail, but they failed, and the 3rd Division lost close to half of their men. Then Cliff's 2nd Division went up and failed. Lord Cliff could not hold it in any longer, and led his direct subordinate army of 3,000 men to attack. But in the end, they still failed. We've lost nearly 1,000 men. The smile on Wen Kang's face disappeared. You haven't heard of it, right? I haven't heard of it before either. But this time, General Chiu Su Hua suffered a huge loss under Bai Yu's hands. He lost over 30,000 men, and General Feng Yunman died in battle. The battle lasted for 6 whole hours. Wen Kang fell silent. The battle is very fierce. Wen Kang felt his throat go dry, and an indescribable shudder spread through his body like seawater. The fortress can't move, and it can't be dodged. The large-scale siege boats need to be anchored before the battle and can't move. At that time, there are no longer any tactics to speak of, and both sides can only shoot at each other. This Xie Yuan is so powerful. Everyone fell into silence once again. They wanted to refute, but they could not say anything. Who is Bai Yu? Everyone sneered at Wen Kang's words and expressed their disbelief. It's 2 brats, Wen Kang said as he extended out 2 fingers. The spectacular scenes surfaced in everyone's mind, and many of them were excited to the point of trembling. Not being able to participate in the Grand Southern Expedition made the soldiers guarding the desolate grounds feel extremely regretful, but the Southern Expedition was still the thing they were most concerned about. It was just that they were isolated from the rest of the world, and only when people went back to report would they be able to obtain the latest news. Everyone had a face of ridicule. Who was Go Chang Wendao? He was one of the 5 honorable martial tigers, and in terms of offensive power, he was the best among the 5 honorable martial tigers. The 5 honorable martial tigers had a high reputation in the honorable martial continent, and it was something that outsiders could never imagine. The soldiers at the bottom worshipped and respected them from the bottom of their hearts. And they were different from the famed generals of the other continents. Other than Mu Jixia, the other 4 of the 5 honorable martial tigers all had outstanding military achievements. When the famed generals of the other continents were still playing hide and seek with the pirates, the 4 of them had already massacred the continents. I say, why haven't I heard of him before? Wen Kang, can't you be more reliable? You make Bai Yu sound like a big shot. The Shang continent is truly rich and overbearing. Without saying a word, they immediately gave Xie Yu and a silver great army. The most extravagant one, do you know what it is? Spirit objects. The Shang continent actually gave Xie Yu and Swift army a spirit object for everyone. And then, their training changed from once a day to once every 3 days, and then to once every 10 days. After that, they simply stopped training. Is there any news from the front lines? The Sindor did not prohibit alcohol. An attack that required more than 6 spirit objects was also something they could not imagine. They were unable to escape from their posts, and occasionally there would be sinners who came to challenge them, and if they truly escaped, their families would be in trouble. But in the past few years, the sinners had disappeared, and the days were so dull that it made people despair. The last time the sinners appeared, the army was in an uproar, and everyone came out to watch the show. Wen Kang's tone was solemn. Losing 30,000 men in a battle was something rarely seen in the honorable martial continent's history. Furthermore, the commander-in-chief was a famed general like Chiu Su Hua. No matter how biased everyone was, they had to admit that Bai Yu's standard was outstanding. The Sindor was cut off from the rest of the world, the environment was harsh, and there were no benefits. It was an extremely bitter job. Naturally, no one was willing to come, and it was a place of exile. Commander Wu Xian had offended the higher-ups in the past, and they were all unlucky. After staying there for 10 years, All of their lofty aspirations had been ground down. Sigh, everyone took in cold breaths. 22 large-scale sieging frigates. What kind of concept was that? This point of view had long been deeply ingrained in the hearts of the honorable Marshall continent. When they heard that General Wen Dao had met his opponent, everyone's reactions became intense. When Kong said that, even he himself was envious. Someone could not help but ask. Then the Ocean Guardian stronghold suddenly exploded with an intense attack. No one knew what it was. When Kang's voice was slightly hoarse, it was extremely intense, even more so than the large-scale sieging frigates. At that time, 3 large-scale sieging frigates suffered from the attack and exploded. The sentry duty was extremely boring. They played cards and drank to pass the time. If not, they did not know how to live. Or was General Wen Dao purposely showing weakness? Everyone exclaimed in surprise, all of their eyes turning red and salivating. Oh my God, he is truly a tyrant. Are you for real? Everyone quieted down, all of their faces revealing looks of disbelief. Wrong. One of them isn't young anymore. In that moment, everyone was stunned. When Kong saw that everyone had surrounded him, the feeling of being the center of attention made him enjoy it, but his face remained solemn. General Wen Dao has met his opponent this time. 2 brats? Are you kidding me? When Kong, you weren't tricked by them, right? Everyone's mouths were wide open. Their faces were pale white. The few sentences that they said about the battlefield caused everyone to suffocate. Everyone became extremely focused. It was truly a legend. When Kang's voice trembled as he spoke, everyone burst into an uproar. Did the Gold Continent make a move? But soon, everyone noticed Wen Kang's silence, and they couldn't help but be stunned. 3 armies. General Go Chang Wen Dao will head for the Southern Alliance. General Moxin will head for the left wing, and General Chiu Su Hua Chiu will head for the right. At that time, General Chiu Su Hua led a 150,000-strong army and was in a deadlock with the Sacred Pagoda Army as the core of the Southern Region Allied forces. The defensive line of the Allied forces was in danger, and General Chiu Su Hua was about to win. Baiyu's White Crow army appeared like ghosts at General Chiu Su Hua's side and launched a ferocious sneak attack, causing General Chiu Su Hua to suffer heavy losses. In this Baiyu that you have never heard of, his White Crow army has just been promoted to a gold rank army. That's right, everyone was tricked by him. They thought that he would hold General Moxin back. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. This Xieyuan became famous after this battle, obtaining the title of the 3rd best defense in the world. After that, he retreated to the Ocean Guardian stronghold, and Master Go Chang Wen Dao decided to personally take action. The scene at that time was so spectacular that it caused the sky and earth to change. Master Go Chang Wen Dao brought a total of 22 large-scale siege boats. Never heard of it. So what if you're rich? All right, what should I do if I get jealous? Right? When I heard about it, I was dumbfounded. The people of the southern region were born to be merchants. They were born to do business. The Shang continent was overflowing with wealth upon encountering a problem. Without saying anything, they would buy. At that time, the Shang continent had business dealings with the Bai family, and this Xieyuan was part of that business. Exactly. Little fellow, do you think everyone is General Chiu? I have some impression of him. I think there's such a person in the Bai clan of the southern domain, but he's not famous. It's a soul object attack. When Kong was silent for a moment before saying, the higher-ups have already analyzed that this is a special kind of soul attack. It used soul items to absorb energy, forming an energy vortex, and finally resonating with it. The higher-ups had already calculated that they would need at least 6 spirit items to launch a single attack. Every time they attack, the soldiers have to pay a huge price. Xieyuan is Baiyu's classmate, and his experiences are even more legendary. At that time, the Southern Alliance, it was not called the Southern Alliance, it was called the Shang Continent. At that time, the Shang Continent did not have any armies, and they thought of an idea. They have decided to buy an army. What kind of attack can be stronger than a large-scale siege boat? Lu Kai passed the wine flask in his hand to Wen Kong, and upon hearing that, the others immediately gathered over. When Kong had just returned to report, and there would definitely be new information. The Sin door was cut off from the rest of the world, and it was not easy for them to return. According to the rules, they could only return to the Honorable Martial Continent once every 3 years. Chapter 8:12. The battle was intense and short, and lasted for roughly half an hour. But in that half an hour, Gocheng Wundao had suffered heavy losses, losing around 30 silver-grade warships and 123 bronze-grade warships, with a death toll of 15,000 men. A portion of them were burned alive in the warships. Master bought them so cheaply, it truly is a huge profit. That's right. How can I compare Master in doing business? The only thing that surprised him was the might of the star treasures in the sea of energy. Gocheng Wundao suddenly realized that he was stuck in a dilemma. No one has realized this yet, other than me. Impart your training experience in Heaven's Road to them. They already possess good tactics, and once their individual strength increases, they will quickly form their own fighting capabilities. It was actually able to pose a threat to warships. But the feeling this time was completely different. He felt as though he was cutting into a pile of cotton or cutting into water. It was extremely sluggish. All of the large-scale siege boats were incinerated, and not only that, even the medium-scale siege boats were almost completely destroyed. Gocheng Wundao was enraged and attacked on all fronts. But what he did not expect was that the mysterious army did not retreat, but instead relied on the wreckage of the siege boats to attack them. The situation of the battlefield confirmed Bing's prediction. He walked out of the ward quietly. The ordinary soldiers of the Honorable Martial Alliance only knew that the D continent had spirit objects, but Gocheng Wundao knew that the Shang continent spirit objects were star treasures that came from Heaven's Road. What made Gocheng Wundao want to vomit blood was that the army also had a star treasure. The intense battlefield was filled with wreckage. But he did not expect that the ripples from the battle had only just begun to spread out. He was a lunatic, but an intelligent lunatic. Gocheng Wundao did not find it strange that the army was proficient in using star treasures. The higher-ups of the Honorable Martial Continent had long investigated Tang Tian's background, and it was normal for the Southern Alliance to be proficient in using star treasures. Xie Yuan's ears could not hear anything. The intense explosion and impact had caused him to lose his hearing. But he waved his arms with all his might, shouting out words that he did not know, encouraging the soldiers, encouraging himself. Xie Yuan's eyelashes fluttered in his sleep, and he slowly opened his eyes. Sunlight shone in through the window, shining on his face, making him feel warm. It felt like a lifetime ago. He had the same dream for the past few days. Every time he woke up, his chest would be filled with inexplicable sadness. He was like an extremely sharp blade that only attacked and did not defend. He did not care how many times he was slashed by the enemy, but no one could block his blade. Therefore, from the start of the battle, the 4 Southern Island tribes gave him a huge surprise. You don't have to worry too much about army tactics, because the Sacred Saint Galaxy's battle style is destined to be changed by star treasures. Don't think that I'm exaggerating the use of the secret treasure. Please believe in the eyes of a general who has experienced the cruelest of battles. The shape of the war would not remain the same forever. On the contrary, any variable could change it, and secret treasures are such a variable. What made Gocheng Wundao feel even more sullen was that it was not them who forced the enemies to retreat, but the enemies who took the initiative to retreat. What made him want to vomit blood was that the enemy had chosen to retreat into the Ocean Guardian stronghold. The star treasure is in Heaven's Road. Because of the problem with the concentration of energy, its might is greatly weakened. But in the Sacred Saint Galaxy, there's an endless supply of extremely dense energy, and its might will increase to an unprecedented level. Under the flickering light auras from the explosions, the trembling scene became silent. Xie Yuan, who was in a frenzied state, was extremely calm. His thoughts drifted, and the past was like smoke. No stronghold was able to defend against 22 large-scale siege boats. But the Southern Alliance did it miraculously. Gocheng Wundao frowned. The battle had ended, but he knew that he would never be able to forget it for the rest of his life. In other words, they had started to think about tactics. The light auras from the explosions would occasionally illuminate the stronghold ruins, even if he could not hear it, even if everyone else could not hear it. The enemies were extremely proficient in fighting in the sea of energy and had obviously gone through specialized training, which surprised Gocheng Wendao. In the sea of energy, it was the world of warships. Without the protection of warships, the pervasive energy corrosion was enough to destroy any army. Even pirates would not go and train to fight in the sea of energy. Furthermore, a person's fighting ability was not worth mentioning in front of a warship. The long-distance training in the sea of energy continuously raised their strength, and killing the pirates along the way gave them even more opportunities to train. It is a pity that I am unable to become a gold rank battle general. The large-scale siege boats that were unable to move upon being approached by the enemies, they would immediately become live targets. The soldiers frantically threw the remaining star treasures into the battle. The star treasures that were usually more precious than their lives were violently detonated. One after another, the sinister and crazy young faces were already filled with tears. They were unwilling to part with them. There were very few places in the sea of energy where they could find cover, and the majority of them were vast and chaotic energy flows. The warships had difficulty moving forward, but Gocheng Wendao remained unmoved, although the destruction of the 22 large-scale siege boats made him furious. But he had the advantage in numbers. After inspecting the last soldier, he looked around. Many of the beds were empty, and the familiar faces mixed with the scenes of the past surfaced in his eyes. In the past, they were just a small army in charge of security. One spirit object was enough to buy their entire army, and even after so long, they were still a group of country bumpkins. He did not know that at that moment, on the other side of the battlefield, Crane also thought about Bing's words. He realized that he had truly underestimated the Southern Alliance. Since the start of the war, there had been many bumps, and there were unspeakable awkwardness, as the other party would always appear at unexpected places and suddenly strike him. It was different from any battle that he had experienced in the past. Other enemies would naturally have places that made him feel fear, but to Gocheng Wendao, who believed in "you fight your own battles, I'll fight mine," it did not affect him much. Even Gocheng Wendao, who viewed human lives as grass, upon seeing the casualty report, his eyes could not help but twitch. If there were any large-scale siege boats, it would be extremely easy to take down the stronghold ruins. But all of the siege boats were destroyed. On the long bench under the sunlight, tears flowed down his face. A small local army that was bought over, a middle-aged yet unknown and hesitant general, an added bonus to the business. The large-scale siege boats were the size of strongholds, while the middle-scale siege boats were the size of small mountains, and the battlefield was filled with wreckage. Gocheng Wendao's fleet was unable to display their full potential in the complicated terrain, but the enemy was able to use the wreckage as a cover to launch wave after wave of attacks. Xie Yuan defended the Ocean Guardian stronghold for a full 6 hours and destroyed close to half of the large-scale siege boats. Just as Gocheng Wendao thought that victory was at hand, Crane led the Star Treasure Army and suddenly rushed into the battlefield. They did not dare to have any extravagant hopes. They did not dare to have extravagant beliefs. At that time, they were muddle-headed and wasted their youth. I never thought that the Southern Alliance would actually have such training. Could it be that they had long anticipated such a situation? Gocheng Wendao personally saw a few warships being destroyed and had a bad premonition. The situation of the battlefield once again surprised Gocheng Wendao. The enemy was actually extremely agile in the sea of energy upon contact. The Honorable Martial Army, who had the advantage in numbers, immediately suffered a large number of casualties. Who still remembers the group of country bumpkins? Who still remembers the Shuang, Fei Yin of the past? The four families grew up in the Sacred Saint Galaxy and were outstanding in tactics, and teamwork had long become their instinct. After their individual strength received a huge increase, Crane realized to his surprise that even without his supervision, they automatically started to think about how to work together and how to unleash a greater might. The area that was filled with wreckage and countless of fire regiments had become a death zone. Do you know what that means? That means that a powerful single-soldier equipment has appeared. Its appearance is extremely likely to break the current army model of the Sacred Saint Galaxy. What I am saying is not that the army will leave the stage of history, but that the future army will be even more agile and pay more attention to individual strength. When a single soldier equipment was used, it allowed an individual's strength to pose a threat to a warship, and it also possessed the agility that warships did not have. And when the soldiers that possessed it did not fight alone, but were equally passionate about teamwork, its might would immediately erupt. The Ocean Guardian stronghold was almost blasted into ruins. Out of the 5 Southern Island families, other than the Aries constellation, the other 4 were all under Crane. Crane did not hide anything. When he was in Heaven's Road, he was familiar with the classics and was extremely knowledgeable, although he did not train in them, but he still knew a lot of theories. But the strongest was still the Sagittarius constellation, since the Empress of Sagittarius constellation was his aunt, and he himself was viewed as the most likely successor of Sagittarius constellation. The Battle of the Ocean Guardian stronghold shook the entire world. But the ruins of the stronghold was also a tough bone, and CAU and had completely remodeled the Ocean Guardian stronghold, including the internal structure of the stronghold. They were all changed and strengthened. Even though the exterior of the stronghold was completely destroyed, all of the battle positions were destroyed, but the internal structure was still intact. It was a battle that could be recorded in the annals of history, and the degree of bitterness caused the entire Sacred Saint Galaxy to be speechless. 22 large-scale sieging frigates, such a terrifying formation, was enough to cause any famous general to feel despair and even surrender. He was indifferent to the casualties on the battlefield, but squinted his eyes and carefully observed the battlefield. Looking from afar, the battlefield looked as though there were many bonfires floating. It was a spectacular sight. But he did not regret it at all. He sat up and wore his shoes, then patrolled the sick room. The sick room was filled with his soldiers. The Swift army had suffered heavy losses, far more than any of the previous times. The entire army was left with less than a fifth of the survivors, and even these survivors were not in one piece. Warships after warships exploded one after another, and were engulfed by the raging flames. Go Chung Wendao immediately gave the order to disembark and fight. Xieyuan quietly patrolled the soldiers who were sleeping soundly on the sick beds, his movements extremely gentle. Go Chung Wendao shook his head. The scene in front of him was a coincidence, if not for the wreckage. Facing the terrifying and concentrated attacks of the fleet, the armies would have been destroyed in the blink of an eye. Chapter 8:13. Such pessimistic thoughts filled everyone's hearts. The war was so out of balance. The southern domain was like a child facing an adult, powerless to fight back. If it wasn't for the fact that this arrow was extraordinary, Wei Ting would definitely refuse to use it. To Go Chung Wendao, who had sufficient manpower, it was not a problem. However, as soon as a warship approached, it would be attacked. Wei Ting and the rest hid in the wreckage, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. It had a very strange name, Divine Gold Arrow, also known as Neurotic Arrow. Wei Ting's face flushed red. Master Crane was the dream lover of almost all ladies. When Kong of the Sin Gate did not know that the crucial point of the war had already appeared. He was also immersed in his own description. The entire sentry post was deathly silent. The terrible performance of the southern region's factions had plunged the people into despair. From the moment they received the request for help to the moment they set off, Master Crane's decisiveness was shocking. It was impossible for anyone to associate him with his usual delicate and gentle demeanor. They arrived at the fortress earlier than expected. Master Crane suppressed everyone's desire to fight and hid behind the Ocean Guardian stronghold like an experienced hunter, waiting for the most opportune moment to strike. Wei Ting's face did not have the slightest hint of immaturity of a new recruit, only the calmness of a veteran. The war bow was placed in the most comfortable position in his hand, and the specially made black gold arrow was nocked on the bowstring. The black gold arrow was forged from black gold. The translucent black arrow feathers were compressed into thin black gold flakes, and the body of the arrow was covered in dark golden patterns. But the one who truly appeared out of nowhere was Crane. After witnessing the suffocating 6-hour battle, the densely packed war beasts, the incessant roars of the flames of war, and the terrifying turbulence of energy, the people were shrouded in fear and despair. Such an eclectic taste and style simply made people look up to him. Master Crane never spoke loudly. His voice was clear and bright, always so confident. He was always so calm and composed, elegant and graceful. Even when he gave the order to attack, he was still holding his sword and walking calmly, so handsome that it was dazzling. The remaining wreckage of the battleship was the hardest part of the battleship. Anything that could be burned would have long turned into ashes. Ordinary attacks from warships could leave terrifying scars on them, but they could not destroy their structure. The best way to clean up this area was to use the warships to drag the wreckage away. Suddenly, a strange sound startled everyone, and everyone seemed to wake up from a dream. The burning southern domain began to show its determination and will to the Saints. The orderly retreat, the charge, and the infiltration were enough to prove that this was a battle general with an ice-cold mind. Wei Ting-Ting's eyes were like water as she observed the enemy's movements. This battle had many aspects that could not be replicated, but under such terrifying attacks, he had persisted for a whole 6 hours. Whether it was his level of defense or his will to fight, they had made him the strongest defensive general in the sanctuary, and his reputation had even surpassed the other two. At that time, there were countless of scouts spying on the Ocean Guardian stronghold from afar, and the battle attracted the attention of the entire Sacred Saint Galaxy. The entire process of the battle was recorded by the scouts of each clan. These images were like a hurricane exploding in the sanctuary in a very short time. But when the video of the battle spread, it began to show its power. From Xiaoyu An's amazing feat to Crane's sudden appearance, everyone realized that the Southern Alliance was not as weak as everyone thought. Adding by Yu, the Southern Alliance already had 3 top-grade battle generals. Everyone was shocked at the Southern Alliance's talents, and felt that the Southern Alliance was even more mysterious. How many more geniuses are hidden in the Southern Alliance? The mercenary army only recognizes money. How can they be so fearless? The Southern Alliance's reputation in the southern region reached an unprecedented height, especially among the commoners. More than half of the southern region citizens felt that only the Southern Alliance could stop the honorable Marshall Continent. That extremely cruel and tragic battle was more convincing than any words could be. But what use is that? It was only a matter of time. The honorable Marshall Continent's army was like a hot knife through butter, sweeping through everything. The southern region was like a wooden house that had long rotted, and with a light push from the honorable Marshall Continent, it would collapse. But when they witnessed the sudden appearance of reinforcements, the fearless ambush, the retreat, the return, the repeated fights, the tenacious determination to fight emerged from the wreckage, striking their hearts. This strange name caused Wei Ting-Ting to be dumbstruck, and after hearing it a few times, she thought that she had heard wrongly. And the logistics department's explanation was that the God Gold Arrow was the short form of the godlike Black Gold Arrow. This explanation caused everyone to be even more shocked. In the battle, the people who attracted the most attention were Xiaoyu and Crane. Moxin knew that he was in trouble. Wei Ting-Ting thought about the joke that everyone was talking about, and her mouth could not help but curve. Countless of people started to prepare their belongings and stepped onto the ship towards the Shan continent. The southern region was burning. Countless of people had tears streaming down their faces. The fear and despair that enveloped their entire bodies was incinerated by the boiling blood and flames. What sound is that? The reason why the neurotic arrows were so powerful was not because every arrow was infused with a living spirit, but because every arrow was infused with a lunatic. But when they witnessed the Ocean Guardian stronghold being engulfed by the explosions, the fearless counterattack, the berserk and decisive firing, the desperate fighting intent, the dazzling flames blossom from the explosions and the trembling scene. Inside the desperate abyss, the sunlight pierced through the dense, dark clouds like arrows. The honorable Marshall Continent's invasion caused the southern region to sink into unprecedented panic. In other places, the scene was explosive and shocking, but in the southern region, its influence was not limited to that. The scene was like a torch that lit up the southern region that had long been drenched in oil. The decisiveness to rush to the rescue, the calmness to wait for the right moment, the powerful individual strength caused everyone's eyes to light up. To be able to realize the value of the wreckage in such a short period of time, it meant that he was extremely sharp towards battles. No one knew. One after another, trading companies started to hang up their maps that were still wet, with the most eye-catching words Shan Continent written on them. It was said that Master Crane was also a newbie and was the same as them, but they could not see it at all. Being on guard was undoubtedly dry and boring. No one spoke, the surroundings were quiet, and the shadows were dim and dark. The inexperienced recruits were able to raise their spirits at the start, but very quickly they became drowsy. She wanted to destroy the honorable Marshall Continent. Even if their fighting spirit was eroded by time, they were still soldiers, and their understanding of battles far surpassed ordinary people. And because of that, the shock and impact they received was even more intense. Maybe she had never thought that there would be a day where she would become like that. At times, Wei Ting would think about her previous life, the carefree life. But she did not want to return to the past, ever since she witnessed the sacrifice of her seniors. Revenge had become her first goal in life. The hatred did not make her lose her rationality, and even when she looked at the enemy fleet, her gaze remained calm and steady. Hope. They saw something called hope. They saw the courage they had lost, the courage to face blood and fire. Even the Southern Alliance's performance was not much better. Their defensive line had completely collapsed, and other than Xiaoyu, and who was the only bright spot, the other places were equally terrible. Baiyu had defeated Chiu Su Hua, causing the southern region people to cheer, but everyone knew that in terms of the overall situation, Baiyu's victory, other than helping the Allied forces to stabilize the situation, did not have any other substantial changes. There were a total of 10 neurotic arrows that were sent over, and Wei Ting was allocated one. Outside the stronghold, the wreckage of warships floated everywhere. The once powerful war beasts were only left with burnt wreckage, silently narrating the bitterness of the battle. Now, the wreckage that could be seen everywhere became their natural sentries. War was the best teacher. The continuous battles made Wei Ting and the rest realize that the densely packed wreckage was their best defense. The complicated terrain allowed them to unleash their fighting strength to the greatest degree. On the other side, Moxin was invincible and unstoppable. The only fortunate thing was that he needed to take a big detour to be able to threaten the Shan continent. Although the battle was tough, but they were not cut off from the outside world. Inside the shadows of a large-scale siege ship wreckage, a vague figure could be seen. Wei Ting's hand subconsciously caressed the black arrow. The exquisite black arrow that looked like a work of art released a unique undulation, like a star treasure. Every neurotic arrow was infused with the latest life spirit produced by the Shan continent, and was the Shan continent's newest secret weapon. There were fewer and fewer enemies like in the past. All the weak fellows seemed to have taken drugs and fearlessly attacked them. The battle started to become difficult, and he suddenly felt as though he was stuck in a swamp. The low-intensity battles were not enough to make him feel threatened, but when their numbers reached a certain level, the situation became delicate. If we were to say that the training in the Sea of Energy had sharpened her willpower and made her stronger and more confident, then the battle had truly made her understand the cruelty of war. She was extremely fortunate that she had such an outstanding commander. She had already grown up. When they looked into the distance, everyone's eyes constricted. It was the southern region, their home, and the raging fire burned in every single southern region citizen's heart. But when the video of the battle was broadcasted to every corner of the streets, he was even ambushed by a few mercenary groups. The situation was too abnormal. Everyone was stunned. Xieyuan was still all right. After all, he was an expert in defense, but after the battle, there was no longer any talk of being the third best defender. If it were the other two, would they be able to hold on for 6 hours under such a disadvantageous situation? The first to sense the change was Xian. He suddenly realized that the enemies that he could easily defeat in the past had suddenly become extremely tenacious. They were like tenacious vines, continuously attempting to entangle his footsteps. Chapter 8:14. They realized that there was something obstructing them from communicating with their own lost surfaces. Honorable Marshal Stronghold. Zhong Libai's face did not look good. The adjutant's eyes revealed a trace of excitement. Master, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. How many years has it been since so many Sin citizens have appeared? This is a true merit. It has been so long since the past. Who knows if they have forgotten about the people involved? With such a huge merit in our hands, if we find someone to plead for us, we might be able to be transferred away. But when he saw that the people were actually retreating, he immediately relaxed. Du Xianyu and the rest were shocked. They did not know that Duca had barged into the Sin door before. Duca, who had the heart to fight to the death, became even more calm and saw even more things. The innumerable crowd was like a dark cloud that suddenly arrived, covering the sky and the sun. The Sin door was built along the mountain, with thick walls that dominated the valley. The gigantic city gate was like a sluice that cut off the valley. The city gate was made out of snow-white metal, and on its surface was a gigantic Honorable Marshal Continent's sun engraving, which released a dazzling white light like the sun. In the distant horizon, densely packed black dots suddenly appeared. Their numbers were so many, as though they were countless of black bees. The so-called auxiliary suppression means that we do not directly attack the target, but use some auxiliary methods to weaken and suppress the target. Nietschio spoke frankly with assurance. The white light released by the sun engraving on the city gate is called the light of the stronghold. It is unique to the Honorable Marshal Stronghold and is able to increase the density of radiant attribute energy here. In the first 100 years after they were chased into the Sin domain, how many people died on the road? They were uncountable. At that time, the group of Sin citizens were arrogant and untamed. They did not fear death and crazily charged into the Sin door. Duca looked at Null Division with red eyes. Duca raised his head. Do the two of you have any ideas? The more he thought about it, the more excited he became and could not help but laugh out loud. Duca was suspicious. Auxiliary suppression? He saw an army of over 5,000 men, all of them moving in an orderly manner. Every soldier had a transparent air shield beneath their feet. 5,000 men stepped on the air shield and flew forward. The sound was like a drum, accompanied by visible air currents that burst out in all directions. The suffocating pressure enveloped the Sin door. Ka ka ka. The sound of teeth chattering suddenly came out. However, even if he knew that it was because of white light, he also did not know how to resolve it. His law domain was not affected much by the white light, but he knew how sturdy those snow-white walls were. Hearing this, Duca hurriedly asked, "Is there anything particular about it?" Zhong Libai spoke, and the Honorable Marshal Stronghold's suppressive abilities are not just limited to this. The dense Honorable Marshal energy allows them to freely combine their suppressive methods. These methods were all mixed in the white light, so it was not easy to detect. However, the attacking side's strength would be greatly weakened. For example, his stamina would be drained faster. We've done some experiments. The light element looks very peaceful, but when its concentration exceeds a certain value, it will become extremely exclusive. The other elemental energies will be suppressed, and from the looks of it, not only will the other elemental energies be affected, but the laws will be affected even more. It is more troublesome. Zhong Libai muttered. It could be said that they had turned out in full force for this battle. Not only did Tang Tian and Du Ke's armies move out, there were also a few hastily formed armies that followed along. Tang Tian could not be bothered with them, and Duca did not object. From the start, Duca had never thought about the strength of this motley crew, but ultimately, the Sin domain was his home, and he hoped that this battle will be able to bring about more changes to the Sin domain that was slowly losing its fighting spirit, and the best way was to let more people witness the battle. Currently, the honorable martial stronghold that had been built for over 200 years had become stronger and stronger as time passed. The Sin door was like a lock around the Sin domain's neck, and it was getting tighter and tighter. How many people are there? The two armies that were originally stationed there were now one army, and the original main army had become an ordinary army. The only thing that made them feel uneasy was that the number of Sin citizens were too many. When Kong and the rest awoke from their stupor and immediately sounded the alarm, causing the panicking soldiers to ascend the walls. And yet Xiu spoke out. It's not that there is no way, but whether it will be effective or not, we need to try to know. I heard that Mr. Du had barged into the Sin door before. I wonder if you could tell us about the situation. This effect is continuous. The longer time passes, the denser the honorable martial energy will become. This place is located in the middle of the valleys, and the terrain is narrow, which is beneficial for the accumulation of energy. That is the most powerful aspect of the honorable martial stronghold. Other strongholds will become weaker and weaker as time passes, but the honorable martial stronghold is the complete opposite. We have done some deductions. If the honorable martial stronghold is built for more than 500 years, its walls will continue to be strengthened by the honorable martial energy, and it will crystallize. A crystallized honorable martial stronghold is unbreakable. The light of the stronghold was not considered tyrannical, but in the area it enveloped, the laws would be submerged by the dense honorable martial energy. It was a sea of honorable martial energy. Wu Xian's body froze, and then his face became ecstatic. That's right. As long as we kill all of these Sin citizens, we will have accomplished a great merit. I'm sick of staying in this damn place. As long as I achieve a great merit, I will have an excuse to move around. Wu Xian was even sorting out his connections. Although he had sat on the bench for so many years, but he was still able to find some connections. In the past, he did not have an excuse, and it was useless for him to find people. But now, the heavens had opened their eyes and gave him such a great merit. He was the #1 man in Sin domain, and his understanding of laws was extremely deep, and no one in Sin domain could match him. He immediately understood why he would fail every time he tried to break through. The bloody suppression caused the pathway to be filled with bones, and the name of the death path home gradually rose. From then on, the number of Sin citizens that tried to break through the Sin door became lesser and lesser. In the years that when Kong and the rest had been stationed here, they would only see a few of them every few years. When Kong, who was previously speaking eloquently, was trembling like a sieve, his face as white as paper, his eyes were filled with endless fear. Master, this is an opportunity. Wu Xian's adjutant suddenly spoke up. The intoxicated Wu Xian climbed up the city walls, and upon seeing the black mass of soldiers below, he immediately sobered up. The fine vibrations sounded like a swarm of bees flapping their wings. Du Xanu and the rest also revealed looks of shock, especially the list of powerhouse's martial artists. They all tried to activate the power of laws, and following that, everyone's faces changed. The closer they got to Yu City, the greater the effect. Thinking about the impregnable stronghold beneath them, all of their fear was swept away. The Sin door had a history of over 200 years, although it was 200 years away from its crystallization, but it was still extremely powerful. For example, the light of the stronghold had a radius of over 60 kilometers. When it was first constructed, the light of the stronghold's radius was only a mere 5 kilometers. When Kong and the rest experienced the initial panic but quickly calmed down. At that time, for the sake of guarding the Sin domain, the stronghold was constructed to an extremely high standard. At that time, the reason why they acted as though they were facing a great enemy was because there were many people who barged into the Sin door, and the stronghold that they entered was relatively weak. Dooku's guess was confirmed, but he was not happy at all. He had a deep understanding of laws, but was extremely unfamiliar with energy. The Sin door emitted an aura that he did not like, and in the past he thought that it was because too many people had died here. He did not think that the seemingly gentle white light was actually the main culprit. Finding the source of the sound did not make LV Kai and the others happy. On the contrary, a bone-piercing chill shot up from the soles of their feet and quickly spread through their bodies. They were like a group of frozen statues, motionless. Tang Tian was a complete amateur in terms of commanding battles. If Bing was here, he would definitely have completed the preparations earlier. And the initial level light of the stronghold had already risen to the middle level, and its might had a qualitative leap. Niet Xiao, who was by the side, spoke out. Honorable Martial Alliance. Oh, that is what you call the Honorable Martial Continent. They have a set of standards for the construction of strongholds. It is extremely strict and has very few weaknesses, and its most outstanding point is that it possesses a large number of auxiliary suppressions. Tang Tian sized up the Sin door. The initial buzzing sound was like a tide approaching, becoming clearer and clearer. It was formed from the air currents that they had stirred up. When Su Yi and the rest who were beside Tang Tian heard their words, their faces changed. Niet Xiao and Zhong Li Bai's strength had long been acknowledged by everyone. But Su Yi and the rest were used to the two of them competing, and it was the first time they had seen the two of them having the same opinion. At that time, there was not one army stationed at the Sin door, but two armies. Although Wu Xian was ostracized, but he still had his standards, he knew that as long as laws were affected, the Sin door was a group of weak chickens, and other than being killed by them, there was no other way. Amidst the buzzing sound, it was accompanied by the sound of war drums. They had never seen such a scene before, and had never even imagined such a scene before. The path to the Sin door was called Death's Return. It was filled with bones and corpses. The pale white bones that had been eroded by the wind had already turned from a dense white to a dim gray. The Death's Return was a gray path. He did not know that he was being watched. When had they ever seen such a spectacular scene before? The Honorable Martial Alliance was the existence that the 12 ecliptic palaces feared the most, and was the target that the 12 ecliptic palaces researched the most. Compared to the other constellations that researched the martial techniques of the Honorable Martial Alliance, the Leo constellation that produced many military generals was more inclined to research the military aspects of the Honorable Martial Alliance, and naturally included the Honorable Martial Stronghold. No problem, Duca said straightforwardly. Dong, dong, dong. Very few people knew that Duca had barged through the Sin door before, and no one knew better than him how difficult it was to do so. Even with Tang Tian's help, he still had the heart to fight to the death. Victory meant life. Defeat meant death. What he paid the most attention to was the Null Division. The standard of tactics displayed by the Null Division far surpassed the other armies, and Duca could not help but fantasize that one day his own army would be able to reach such a level. Everything was because of the stronghold that was constantly becoming stronger. Duca muttered, "So that's how it is." Niet Xiao's tone was calm, but it made everyone around take in a cold breath. Huh? Wu Xian did not understand. Countless of them,